Nvidia has always been on the forefront of general purpose compute. Whenever there's a new paradigm, they've had the tools in advance so everyone can jump on them. AMD's biggest strength is its partnerships, in that everyone who has worked with them loves working with them and wants to continue working with them.
And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom. And today's lead sponsors are CDkeyoffer.com, where you can get Windows 11 Pro for $24, JLC PCB, where you can get $123 in coupons on 6-layer PCBs, and Minis Forum with their new M2 mini PC. Get $30 off with code Broken Silicon. Today, I am joined by someone who, if you are a long-term fan of the channel, should need absolutely no introduction. I say that for like a third or half of my guests, you know, the usuals that I like talking to every year. But this one, Carbon Cry, who wrote the notes for this and for me, this is the 10th time you have been on. But still, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been 10 times. Yeah, I'm Bryan Heemskerk. I'm the art director at Massive Damage. Worked in games for 15 years. Worked on indie, mobile, some AAA. Bit of everything. Just really like rendering tech, how things work. I'm not a leaker. I don't leak information or whatnot. I'm just a artist / game developer, and Tom really likes to bounce stuff off of me. So thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, and I think that should go without saying. People who come on the podcast are not leakers, kind of for obvious reasons. I mean, I will say there were a couple guests. I won't say anything besides they're human. But that, like, I was like, ooh, you know, you have so much experience at like whatever company. Could you come on? And it's like, no. And like there's been times where sometimes someone kind of can, but it's like, yeah, there's actually with someone who was at a major game studio that like almost could come on, but the boss apparently did not want it. So
Cerny,
it goes without saying.
You almost had him.
Yes. Well, that's like the joke, right? Because like I'll leak like all these schematics for like a PlayStation, and they're like, how did Tom meet Mark Cerny? But it's like, I will be honest, everybody, I have met actually some people pretty high up at these companies that would surprise you. It is not Mark Cerny. I've never met Mark Cerny, unfortunately for me, actually. But let's do this. Let me just get right into it. Techno writes in and says, what do you think about Switch 2 prices rising by like 5 to 10% outside of Japan? Do you think Sony will capitalize on this and price match the Switch 2? Well, those are two good questions, but yeah, I mean, there's been rumors of the Switch 2 getting a price increase for months now.
Yeah.
Did this surprise you at all? What do you think about the Switch 2 now being like in the US, for example, 500 instead of 450?
Yeah, I mean, it was on the lower scale, thankfully, of what I was afraid of in terms of price hikes. But I mean, I just had to pick up a kit of RAM that I bought for $119. I had to RMA it. And that same kit of RAM is $600 Canadian today. So, like, that's insane. It's almost 6 times, 5.5 times cost increase on that component. You know, not BOM, but like for retail or for regular people picking up these things. So all of these companies are hitting this. Nintendo makes up enough money on software that they can probably afford to, cover some of the lost revenue that they would encounter from this. But I mean, it was Switch 2 has 12 gigs of RAM? I'm just trying to recall.
Yeah. Well, and it was my impression on the Switch 2 as well that it was probably making a 20% profit or something when it first came out. It's 8 nanometer. I mean, we're talking about stuff from 2020. Some might even say 2019, only 12 gigs of RAM, but I at the same time, Nintendo is not as good at sourcing supplies as like someone like Sony or Apple would be. So it wouldn't surprise me. There's rumors this thing's being sold close to cost. I could believe it at this point, because if you think about it, if it was $350 to make the Switch 2, or so let's say, and then they sold it for $450, but then the RAM goes from in there, what would it be, like $50 to like $150, $200? It's like, actually, maybe it is going from making a decent profit to being sold at cost now.
I think the big problem with Nintendo this generation compared to last like with the original Switch, is that they had guaranteed, they had the titles that people were really looking for with Switch 1, like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Breath of the Wild, games like that were they sold crazy well. And the initial attachment ratio to Switch consoles was like one of each of those copies for each system that went out the door. And you can't say that about anything really in the Switch 2 lineup so far. So they probably have to be a bit more cost conscious on the systems that they sell, because they're not. Mario Kart World probably wasn't as big of a hit as they were hoping for. Neither was Bonanza. Pocopia is doing pretty well from what I understand, but they're probably a little bit more cost conscious until they have that game that pairs with each system sold, basically, that everyone wants really badly, and then they make it. Now they have another $50 of wiggle room essentially on the Switch price, because they're guaranteed to make that up with software sales.
Well, yeah, and I mean, let's be honest too. The Switch 2 came after, and I think all too often people bring up the Wii U, which no one bought. Less people bought that than the PlayStation Vita. But they also failed to mention the 3DS sold half as well as, if I don't even know, it was made less than half as the DS. So you're going from like the Wii selling like 100 million, the DS selling 150 million, 250 million to like 60 plus 13. Like overall, it's like less than maybe a third the sales. So with how many less Nintendo consoles were bought, both mobile and otherwise, before the Switch was basically blessed with everyone would be begging to get new Nintendo games because they skipped that generation to a degree.
I think Nintendo's a little weird in the sense too that they seem to kill every other generation. This is just a observation as someone who's gamed for a really, really long time. But, maybe people just get a little sick of Nintendo software every other generation, and then they miss it and want it again the generation after. Because if you look, NES did crazy well, N64 did okay, GameCube was considered like a flop sales wise, Wii did extremely well, Wii U failed, and then Switch went crazy. So it's almost every other gen. It's pretty close to it that people seem to be craving a bit of Nintendo, and then they seem to sell really well again. I don't know if it's a pattern or if it's just they're pretty good at correcting.
Well, and the fact that it is a pattern, right, means that the second one is which it's kind of a self-perpetuating cycle then. Like, because if everyone skips every other generation, then that means the one they don't skip is going to do extra well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this, like, maybe, people miss Nintendo after 5 years of not having it, and they want to catch up on some software.
And I'm seeing here, is it sold out? Oh, that's interesting. It is not sold out yet, because another thing I was thinking is I've been hearing, and I think other people have been reporting this, that the Switch 2, of course, sold very, very well when it first came out, but that sales were increasingly dropping. This is something I wondered when it was first released, is I'm like, I don't know. Everyone's talking about this like it's a pro console. This might have pro console sales, which the PS5 Pro sold really well at first too. And so the PS4 Pro actually kind of did pretty well the whole time. But like those are usually more front loaded and then taper off. And I'm still feeling like it's too soon to say how big of a success the Switch 2 will be. Yeah. I don't know. It's not going to be a Wii U, but could it be like a 3DS? More like it could be.
It all depends on what software gets paired with it. Nintendo's pretty good at locking exclusivity. So, if there's a game that really attracts people, that system could do very well. So it's hard to know with them. Point two, that's kind of interesting. They did get a huge sales uptick with Pocopia, which was just a piece of software people really wanted. And then oddly enough, when they increased the PS5 and PS5 Pro prices, PS5 Pros were sold out everywhere before the $200.
And that's the thing. I just checked. Switch 2 still not sold out. Now, they have another month to find out, but I do wonder too if this price increase is kind of a way to move the unsold stock over the summer, and it's still not sold out. So that'll be something to watch. If it's not sold out by, what is it? I think they said September they're doing the price increase or something, or they gave people a decent amount of time to my memory. But I should probably check that because then everyone will. Let me just do this. When Switch 2 price increase. It is September. So that's interesting how many months they're giving you to buy it. It almost feels like a ploy to get rid of the oversupply of Switch 2. If this isn't sold out by September with how much time they've given people, I think that'll be another data point in my theory of like, it's going to sell well, but I don't think this is another Switch or Wii situation here.
No, you have a year and a quarter. That's basically a year and a quarter after it came out. Likely you would, I don't know, I'm hoping for an OLED model. That's the one thing, is that that would be great. But I would prefer it to not have that price increase. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. I think that it's just the nature of the beast right now with what's going on in hardware markets. RAM, SSDs, all of these components are in basically every piece of hardware we buy, and even GPUs and soon CPUs. From what I'm seeing now, that AI workloads are getting more inference based than compute and training. So
yeah, I mean, I guess it sounds like, you're like, you don't like, no one likes price increases. No. But at the same time, it's like, I don't see it as that offensive. I mean, $500 when the Series X has been $800 for like over a year now. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's whatever. My main takeaway is, Nintendo saying, or there was rumors, I think, that the $500 is about at cost, and before they were making a profit, so they're actually giving more than they usually would. Mm-hmm. Like, it just is. It's another feather in the cap of this argument I have of like, people saw the PlayStation 5 increases to like, 600, 650, and 900 or whatever it is, and I think people got mad. They're like, oh, here's greedy corporations. And one of my videos, I did the math, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I think actually they're making almost no profit on them besides the PS5 Pro. Once again, I think what's unfortunate is I actually think at $600, they're probably making the same margin, which is to say almost nothing, that they did when they were at $500 years ago. And that's just what it is. That's just the cost of the components right now.
Yeah, I think too that there used to be more of like a cost-effective argument that people would pose, but I think companies like Nvidia and Apple have both set the, let's say, premium stage in terms of what you can get away with on a Halo product. And I think Sony likes having two SKUs for that reason, so they can distance them from each other. And it turns out that the most intense fans of basically any of these companies aren't looking at the price tag as much as other people are. So you might lose some amount of sales. So it's hard to know. Like there's obviously calculations they're doing, trying to determine how much margin they can get away with on these Halo products. And, Switch 2 only has one SKU right now until they release an OLED model or something else. So they have nowhere to go. The move on the PS5 Pro was way worse than the PS5, right? And the Switch 2, it's only $50. It's not the end of the world. I think that we're going to be, hurting pretty much across the board because of just TSMC is it's locked up for forever. Currently, it's like everyone's fighting over yields and whatever wafers they can get, whatever wafer supply. It's kind of interesting because we might see a resurgence of the 30 series just because it's on Samsung. So without competition, if might,
and that's a good thing for Nintendo. I mean, at least the Switch 2 is made at Samsung.
That's it, right? So it's at least not in contention with all of Apple's chips, all of AMD's chips, all of Nvidia's chips. It's insane. So you have one massive well, I'm not going to say monopoly. There's some competitors like Intel and
Intel's
Samsung
becoming a bit more resurgent once again, at least.
Well, I think that we're seeing some more partnerships too. You're seeing more partnerships with Samsung and with Intel because I think everyone's starting to realize, like, hey, if we just have TSMC, we might never be able to get things built. Like, other people will just purchase the capacity, and we won't even have options to any of these ideas anymore. We need some of these competitors to be a bit stronger.
Yeah, so I would say this too, as much as, we don't like price increases. When it comes to the Switch 2, that one actually kind of has more of a ceiling in how much it will go up in price because it has 12 gigabytes of RAM. It doesn't have like 24 gigabytes like in the PlayStation 6 handheld in a year. It has Samsung for the node for the APU, not TSMC 3 nanometer. So, well, it might go up more. I don't think it's under as much pressure and there's as much consternation behind the scenes as probably Xbox and PlayStation right now. So if you're a Nintendo fan, I would say I wouldn't recommend waiting to get a Switch 2. Like definitely get it now. I don't think it's going to go below 450, maybe ever. But at the same time, if you're someone that would rather save $50 now and in 3 years get an OLED, there's not as much stuff in the Switch 2 that will increase its price as there are in its competitors. So it does have that benefit. So that's, I guess, some advice we could give people.
And Nintendo's an island too, compared to everything else. You know that the games that are made by Nintendo are exclusive to it. Everything else is going to be on everything else, but Nintendo's kind of this thing on the side. It's like, if you want to have a little fun and have this adventure, you got to bite whatever their cost of entry is to play in their world.
Well, we'll get to that. I think that might be changing with Sony in terms of where you can play their stuff. But
I have
first,
I have thoughts on that too, so we can get to that.
Oh, good. All right. Well, first though, I mean, we're talking about price increases and issues with RAM. We have to talk about Steam Machine next then.
Sure.
I mean, you came on the podcast last year, actually, like right before they announced the Steam Machine, and I was actually very excited about the Steam Machine when it was first announced. Gotta say, that enthusiasm is waning the longer they take to launch it. But how did you feel about the Steam Machine when you first saw its reveal, and how do you feel about it now?
It's I like Valve hardware. It's always fun to play with. Like the Steam Deck, for instance, is actually pretty underpowered right now in the handheld space, like all the RG allies and all these other devices. What's the other one? Legion Go. And anyways, there's a huge barrage of additional handhelds that all outpower it. But the OS and the ecosystem being tailored to it still makes the Steam Deck pretty fun and popular. And I mean, I was just playing on it last night because I was playing Ground Zero. It's like an old RE make. And this is kind of where I'm thinking, you know, the problem is where this device is positioned, not what it is. Because are there lightweight games? Like sometimes my friends and I play whatever, Arc Raiders or heavier games. Sometimes we do cheese rolling in repo. And would a machine like the Steam Machine be perfectly well catered to, you know, 70 to 80% of the games we play? Is it going to run, Alan Wake 2 particularly well? Probably not. And I would be surprised if you could probably get a good 30 FPS locked experience at, you know, somewhere between 1080p, 1440p on it.
I bet you could get 60. You're just not turning up ray tracing at all.
You'd be turning off a lot of visuals.
You'd be turning that off.
Yeah. Well, even textures, you'd probably have to lower textures to hit it with the 8 gigs of RAM. I mean, hopefully they have some means to mitigate that because they have, 8 gigs of GPU RAM, 16 gigs of system memory in the Steam Machine.
So 24 total. And it's rumored that they might have some version of FSR4 to help compress some of that as well, that they port themselves.
Yeah, they do. You know, I have to hand it to them. One of the cool things, like I had a Steam Deck at launch, and all of the way the OS changed, even like the battery menu, the amount of settings that they had. You know, they had hardware. You could just turn on what is it? One of the DX12 features. Sorry, it's a type of rendering where it's like a sparse rendering. You could turn on like all of these things on the go. You could limit your display refresh rate. They give you through the OS hardware control on a level that's pretty unheard of. And it was very fun. It was cool to see those kind of iterations on their software as time came. So I think that Valve is in a really, really good position. First of all, if anyone at Valve's watching this and they want to reach out to me and send me some Steam machines, I'd be totally down. But
Me too.
For me, it's like I wouldn't use this instead of my desktop PC downstairs. Would I use this in my upstairs living room and then be like, hey, do I have to go downstairs to play this? And then I try and it's like, oh, this is actually fine. And I play it happily versus go downstairs and play. Maybe, you know, in those kind of contexts, it could be really, really good. If I know I'm playing a game that's more like an indie game or whatever, some kind of roguelike or something that is lightweight, will I just pick that right away? Sure. If it fills my my LG OLED at 120, 165 hertz and runs at a reasonable resolution like 1440p, I'd have a blast with that. So I think that that's good to create a floor. One of the best things Steam's done with its ecosystem is their checkmark system and validation process. You look at a Steam Deck game and it gives you like either a no sign, don't play this, a yellow, like, hey, you know, yeah, you're going to have some text issues. You might have some judder or freezing here or there. And it tells you the issues, which is the best part. You click into it and it's like, the text wasn't formatted for this, so it's going to be too small. You know, you might have trouble reading some of it. It's like, okay, well, now I know the problem I'm facing. They're really good at catering an experience that way. And then if it's like a green light, then two of the best experiences I had with the Steam Deck were brand new games that launched that I could play a portable version of the day they came out, which was Elden Ring and Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon. Having a handheld version of both of those games the day they came out was like one of the best experiences I had. I was playing it both ways. Sometimes you have to grind in these games. I was able to pop off and do that. And I think they're creating a new ground floor for hardware in a way that I think is really, really good. And for some people that don't want to think about games too much, that just want to play, they don't want to think about the hardware, is there like a happy medium here for most of them? I think they maybe went probably 20% underpowered from being a really clean version of that. I think it's going to be a bit more finicky than that. If it pairs with a new version of like FSR4, like something to get out of FSR3.
And supposedly they're going to have some bespoke code to make it RDNA3 run ray tracing a bit better. So we'll see if they achieve that. If they can get with these things though to at least PS5 image quality and frame rates, I think they'll have something.
Well, if you look at like Optiscaler, right? Is it possible Steam can work something like that into their ecosystem? The
short answer is yes. I mean, why couldn't they?
Well, if they're partnering with AMD to make sure that they should be able to do it a little bit better than most hardware vendors in that space. So there's somewhere there, and like shout out to, Vex and Daniel Owen and Ancient Gameplays, because they've done really, really good work covering all of these kind of like niche softwares. But I think that there's a good chance that if anyone's going to pull in these things in a way that makes this hardware punch out over its weight in the PC ecosystem, it's Steam. So maybe this hardware is going to be what it needs to be. I personally would have wished for more VRAM and probably a 20% more powerful GPU, but
it doesn't concern me as much though in SteamOS, because I think they'll make the VRAM work because it's more efficient than Windows and stuff. Look, you're getting a budget system through and through, but I think it's enough. My concern is price, because I think there's something truly wrong with their ability to negotiate for enough RAM at the right price if it's taking this long to come out, because this is insane. We're in May as of this recording. This thing was clearly supposed to come out in like March or something. And it would have if they had the right RAM at the right price. And so I guess that's what I'm asking you
as well, probably.
Yeah, and like maybe even just getting them, period. I don't know. Like so that's my question though, is like I want to get into the price, because fundamentally this thing is only good because it has a good price. There's nothing this does a PS5 or something else can't do. Really,
no. It's the same floor as a PS5. So is it moving the floor beyond it? I mean, the PS5's out 4 or 5 years now. So that's the the biggest issue there, is that we're releasing a new piece of hardware that keeps the floor of game development where it's at, which is roughly
on PC. Yeah.
Well, it's just the floor in general for game developers. For game developers, PS5 is the floor. I mean, Series S is the murder your game really to fit on their floor. It's a different version of it, but PS5 is kind of we want the experience to feel really good at that kind of standpoint. The Steam machine is going to fall basically identical to that. I don't think it's probably going to be, look on the CPU side, it's probably a bit more powerful. On the GPU side, it's probably a bit less, would be my guess. I haven't played with this piece of hardware, but if I was to just look at what it is. I don't even think its CPU is
really better. It has 2 Zen 4 cores and 4 Zen 4C cores that probably clock on average below the PS5s. And from what I've seen in testing, because of, you get a little bit of this with the Steam machine running Linux, but like with the IO controllers, like how much in the PS5 they keep some stuff away from the CPU. Most analyses I've seen is it actually beats Zen 3 a little bit in some games. Like you can see direct Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 comparisons with like unlocked
Dragon's Dogma as well. There's a bunch of games like that that run better on the PS5 because of the IO die.
So if it's a lightly run game hitting 120 hertz, I'd say because it's 2 Zen 4 cores are in there, the Steam machine's better. But if it's a game bogging down like Battlefield 6 that is really using every core and thread, I don't think it's really faster than the PS5 CPU even. Probably not.
Well, we're seeing some interesting things. I just saw, I think Ancient Gameplays just did a video on the new Xbox profile mode, where in Windows you can run an Xbox profile that is like a super lightweight. And some games that it looked like the games that were probably the most CPU limited got a huge bump. And, in regards to a PS5, yeah, I think the Steam machine is going to, probably be pretty comparable, maybe a little bit worse in some ways.
Better in some games, but I'm not convinced in every game it's that much.
But the Steam OS operating system might be enough to compensate, at least on the Windows side, in comparison to similar spec on PC, that if you have a light enough OS that is pretty fully featured, which I'm sure they're going to be pretty great at, it's going to be that kind of piece of hardware. So I think it'd be fun in some settings. I think for the games that fit easily on it, like any whatever indie mega hits that pop up out of nowhere, I think it's going to be great. It's the AAA stuff that's probably going to have some issues. I mean, depending on it. I mean, Resident Evil 9 you can get running pretty good on almost anything.
On a Switch 2, actually, yeah.
Well, I played it mostly on Switch 2. I have played it on PC and Switch 2 and PS5 Pro, and I played more of the game on Switch 2 just because I could fit it in and more. And I wanted to get all the achievements and do all the crazy, beat it in 4 hours.
Well, let me get right into it, though, because there are some people that maybe you haven't seen this, so it makes sense if you have. This is like the stuff I have to think about because I have to follow the comments and like, what is the community talking about? And there's this, I think it's very small, but there's this vocal minority of Steam machine stands that think this is going to kill PlayStation and it's going to do so at $800. And my answer to them is, if it's $500, I think it's very compelling. It is not going to, this is going to be dead on arrival nearly outside of the first wave of sales, I think, if it's $800. And actually just today, the Fox, who's someone who comes on Broken Silicon a lot as well, just tweeted, HP is selling a 7600, is it 7600M or what does this thing come with here? Yeah, 7600. So a 7600 desktop with an 8400F. So this is 6 full Zen 4 cores and the full 32 CUs for the GPU. It's not cut down like in the Steam machine for $700. Yeah. And it comes with Windows installed. So this argument of, but you have to install. No. This is built for you. It's done. It's a nice looking case. So like that tells you, in my opinion, this is the ceiling. And really, it should be 600. And if it's not, I've already gone on all these rants. I can build a better PC for 750 that kind of runs circles around the Steam machine. So, that's just what worries me is that they can't even get it below 700 or 600. That's what I'm concerned about. This spring, Jessie, like many Belgian Malinois, is starting her own logging company outside. And I gotta say, watching her do this, it's bizarre. It's almost as weird as someone paying full price for Microsoft Office or operating systems, and that is why this piece of content is brought to you by CDkeyoffer.com. That's right, once again, the longest running sponsor actually of Moore's Law is Dead, CDkeyoffer.com, is sponsoring this piece of content, and that's because I just think it's something that should be out there, something that our community should always know about, and that is reasonably priced Microsoft keys and also deals on different pieces of software like games as well on their website. Now, if you're interested in supporting Moore's Law is Dead and thus supporting a sponsor that supports Moore's Law is Dead, go to CDkeyoffer.com through the link below. Just clicking on that link helps a ton. But then if you do go there and want to buy something, make sure you use offer code Broken Silicon to save 25% on all Microsoft software and Die Shrink to save 3% off everything else on the website. Again, they've been a great sponsor this whole time. I love working with them. It's easy to work with them, and they provide a service I think this community needs, reasonably priced Microsoft keys. So support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out CDkeyoffer.com today.
I don't know what kind of custom engineering, and obviously the OS extension, the whatever they're building in terms of the software that's running it versus having to run Windows, there might be some cost there they're trying to recoup.
I think so, yeah.
So they might punch a bit above it. Like desktops and laptops, and they've sleep-wake issues like crazy. We talk about Nvidia stability versus Radeon stability, but the reality is I play with one group of friends that are more console based. I play with another group of friends that are more PC based, and my PC friends have people drop off on our gameplay sessions, hardware failures, no matter what is the most stable piece of hardware you can get is a PS5. As far as I'm concerned, nothing on PC comes close in terms of, just dropping players. We have players that, my computer crashed or something happened when I was shader compiling. So whatever, my storage is full. This happens. And Is it the perfect ecosystem? No. Are there things that Valve is trying to improve about it? Sure. They might try to recoup those costs as well, and people won't like that aspect, but there were people.
But then it's comparable to a PS5, which is $600. See,
well,
so
it was,
still,
yeah, it was $600.
So it still is without a disk drive. The Steam Machine isn't the disk drive.
Yeah, it's hard to know if they would have released a PS5 now. There's nothing that I like about the price increases other than I think it's helping people have more fun with what they already have. And I don't think that's a terrible thing when people are like, hey, let's just play this. We're having fun. I lowered my settings and it runs great. I see a $600 RAM price sticker and I'm now more happy with my PC than I was. My friends that got like 5700 or 5800 X3Ds are just still having a blast on their PCs.
Yeah, but this isn't a selling point for the Steam Machine. The selling point isn't, don't worry, low settings still looks good. So that's my concern with the Steam Machine here. And it's like, you can make the argument, oh, well, maybe the Steam Machine will have console-like stability. And I think it totally might. But if it does, sure, but that HP desktop I just mentioned for $700 that comes with actually better specs than the Steam Machine, I can upgrade it. Like, see, because people keep trying to have their cake and eat it too with the Steam Machine. They keep trying to say, oh, well, you're getting a PC for this price, but no, you're not. You can't upgrade the CPU. You can't upgrade the GPU, and the GPU only has 8 gigabytes RAM. That HP, I can upgrade to a higher capacity VRAM GPU in the future. So it's like, no, it can't cost more than this desktop. You're getting probably not all, but some of the console efficiency and stability in exchange for console-like upgradability minus the RAM, I guess. And so I still think it has to cost less.
I guess the best thing that Steam is going to be able to do in this case is probably going to be more curation than anything. Like I was saying with the Steam Deck, when you have people don't know when they buy games. You buy Crimson Desert, is it going to be okay? Is it not? Monster Hunter Wilds, is it going to be great on it? They're recommending frame generation. What am I supposed to do? People don't know. Most people aren't as deep into this as we are, or even deeper as some people are. It's just a lot of people just want to play games on a device and have that experience. And the curation might be enough for them people to sell over a little bit over the, have cool features, have some curation, have a set hardware standard where you can kind of tell the more we get more devices on SteamOS, there could be some really cool stuff with that. We're barely playing with this space. They just opened it up to Radeon GPUs, like a wide array of them. They've just opened this up to other things, but then you lose that ability to curate. One of the reasons it works so well with Steam Deck and probably with Steam Machine is because set hardware, they can be more direct. They can intercept calls because they're translating everything to Vulkan. They can make all these kind of cool changes that are really, really hard to do in a desktop PC space. We do stuff like that on consoles already, but it's a bit different. You're making it already that way.
Yeah, so I guess I want to be clear too, because it actually blew my mind. Like, I don't remember if it was a podcast, live stream, but in the past month, I saw a lot of comments of something I put out that were like, why is this guy such a Steam Machine hater? And I'm like, guys, like I had like a month of like Steam Machine fanboy, and I'm not a hater. I always rage against people that I think aren't living in reality. Like the people that told you the PS5 is going to be $800, and now the people that tell you the Steam Machine should be $800. My point is, when I bring up what the Fox is posting on Twitter or what I'm posting when building my own Micro Center version of this, is I'm just saying I don't think it will be more than 700. And I think there's still obvious math to this being 600 or less. But and I don't know if
people don't have access to a Micro Center. I know, like, Micro Center is one of the best places you can buy a PC in the world, almost.
Right, but on Newegg you can get on Newegg right now you can get a 7600 or 7600X for $140. That's 6 full Zen 4 cores. See, the example I put up with Micro
CPU. So like I had to pick up a computer recently for a friend, and the RAM. What Canada Computers is doing, it seems, to try to mitigate this RAM apocalypse, is they basically give you the CPU and motherboard for free right now.
That's what Micro Center does a lot too.
If you buy the RAM, it's $600. If you buy the RAM, CPU, and motherboard, it's $650. So they take a $300 discount on that's what they seem to be doing. And that's in Canada. My brother lives in North Carolina. He messages me every once in a while for computer advice. He has a Micro Center somewhat near him. And when I look at the prices there, I'm like, oh, I wish that I had this. Hey, Micro Center, if you ever want to come to Canada, you should. But
so I'm also adding things up. Even if I buy a 7600X on Newegg without some fancy deal, even with the RAM, because they're going to be using bare bottom of the barrel DDR5 for this. I mean, I'm getting to about a $700 PC. I'm still getting to about 700. The Micro Center deal wasn't about, everyone can easily get a 7500 X3D in this price. I'm just saying, if I was in America, that's what I would do. But I can still build it for this. It's still a better PC for this price. I don't have to use Micro Center. I just did because I'm like, well, make sure you do that if you and also like, even if it's a special deal with Micro Center, Valve's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They should be able to mass produce something better than I can finding a deal. We
haven't played or interfaced with it. Maybe it feels a lot better. I don't know. Sometimes you have situations where just the right amount of hardware is super interesting. I don't personally. I'm worried about how it's going to age. It's probably fine for right now. It's more of the aging component that I'm a bit wary of.
The curation thing makes me not worry too much. I think I already said that though.
Yeah, that's what I think we're going to get more than anything. It's just I have friends that have mishmash PCs. One of them has whatever. They have a 3070 in it, but they have a 9800 X3D. Let's say that's one of my friend's PCs. So CPU, he's perfectly fine, but even a 3070 is having some games where you boot it now and you're disappointed. You're just like, oh, that. Well,
you're talking about a mid-range GPU from 6 years ago, people.
For sure. I'm just saying you end up with stuff like that. Hey, I've shipped games before and you get really weird comments. You have people that are like, they threw a 3060 in a computer with a Xeon from like Sandy Bridge. And then they're like, why does this game not run well? And like, we didn't play test for this really obscure Sandy combo with your DDR2 and whatever like you put in this machine.
3, but
I know, I'm just joking. You get those kind of combinations.
Some people do that, yeah.
Yeah, you get these combinations. I see YouTube videos where people do it for fun. They just, hey, I found this old piece of hardware. Let's see what it runs. Where does it fall apart? But I don't know. We haven't touched this thing. I haven't touched this thing. It could be okay. It's a little lightweight. Like I was saying, my personal stance is, and I wish it had about 20% more GPU. I'm not sure on the CPU. That's going to be way more dependent on how lean they get their OS.
I think it's enough. It's just, let's not pretend this is any more than something that's kind of meant for 60 hertz.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it would be nice to hit 120 on indie games. If you can do that, that'd be pretty sweet. But maybe not Battlefield 6. Maybe you got a 60 lock.
There's no way. I don't think. Well, yeah. Okay. And so again, I'm going to make this disclaimer again. I am not hating on the Steam machine. I am hating on the people that think it will cost $800 because I think that makes no sense. Although if it does cost $800, my hate will then transfer from these people to the Steam machine, because I don't know how you could possibly be this bad at planning and getting components. Like you're worse than me with a shopping cart if that's what you accomplish.
I do think that what it does too, though, the Steam machine in the developer space, as the Steam Deck already does this to some extent. I've worked with publishers, and I know some publishers that playtest a lot of games, like lighter weight indie games, on Steam Decks. Mm-hmm. Because they're sure if the game runs well enough on a Steam Deck, we'll hit Switch 2 no problem. Mm-hmm. So the Steam machine will likely do the same thing for people that can't get into, because there are tiers of indie devs. There's the indie devs that are, just making a project and they're just working on some bit of Windows. There are indie devs that are mid-scale or upper scale that have had a bit more success, that have dev kits. Not every indie dev has dev kits or access to dev kits for every game, or has a publisher that will give them dev kits. These things exist, but
yes, I'm told Nintendo still isn't sending out Switch 2 dev kits to like almost anyone.
But they might be able to front $500, $600, $700 for a Steam machine and another point in time and they're sure, hey, if we get this running well on a Steam machine and a Steam Deck, now we have our Switch 2 target guaranteed and our PS5 target guaranteed. And as an entry point for those developers, are they fun pieces of kit? For sure. I think that I'm glad Steam's making them. I don't know whether their sale on like 1440p gaming or whatnot. I don't know what they put in their material, whether that's going to be something that lands as easily. It's not going to be as high end of an experience unless they get FSR 4 or
running.
something like that as a hard coded feature within that, because the degradation of visual quality with 3 and 2 is too far. 4 looks great. I honestly, I played with 4. DLSS 4 looks great, and plus looks great as well. But anything before that is kind of, Valve needs to cover that to make sure that they can get away with running at lower native resolutions to make some of these games more feasible. That's what's making Resident Evil 9 more feasible on Switch 2 is DLSS.
So like what, again, though, the common denominator thing for Steam Machine, this is something that's excited me since it was announced, if they accomplish it. But they only accomplish that if it's a reasonable price. Like my dream would be, a year ago, it was like I was hoping for, $450 without a controller, $550 with one, or $500 with one. I don't think that's probably what we're going to get. But like, let's say they did. Let's say they get $500 no controller, $550 with a controller, $650 with more storage. I don't know what they do. Like, I still think that's going to be a big deal because it kind of removes the annoyance of telling someone trying to get a budget PC what to do. Because it's like, wow, I can't find this 3060 for less than 300. The CPU is 200. You can tell all of those people, just get a Steam machine. And then to the people, and a lot of developers I talk to, I'm sure you're one of them, where you see people go, what? My Xeon doesn't run your game well. You can just respond, dude, get a Steam machine. It's less than a graphics card. But that's only if they can do that. Chris Rich writes, and it says, let's say that Valve launches a Steam machine at $500 in a month. What kind of lifetime sales do you think are likely? Do you think it could have a long life, or its sales quickly fade when the next generation launches? And what sort of gamers do you think are the main target audience? So the question basically being, at $500, do you think this thing is a success?
I think the thing that a lot of people seem to forget, Valve's, I guess, like tepid original Steam machine announcement, because they announced Steam machines like 15 years ago at this point, or 10 years ago. I don't know how long ago. But they were more, anyone can build them. I don't know whether Steam Deck taught them that they need a more catered ecosystem. And what's the total lifetime sales on the Steam Deck so far? Is it like 5-6 million? 7,
I think it's mostly estimates, but yeah, I think 5 to 10. I don't even know if it's at least 5, I think. Yeah.
It's not small enough that you can ignore it, but it's not big enough that it's changing any tides, let's say. And for game developers, what it is that, especially since the Switch 2 launch, it's the guarantee that you'll be able to run your game on Switch 2, just if you can target Steam Deck, because Switch 2 dev kits are much, much harder to get your hands on. And I've seen that. I've seen that for maybe the last, since the Steam Deck launched, a little bit in the PC space, but since the Switch 2 launched, I've seen it a lot more. So I don't know what kind of demographic there is. I know people that I would probably recommend this to, where they find they want PC, they like PC, they like their Steam library, but every update's a hassle. Every time something goes wrong with their computer, they don't want to be the one to open it. There's people like that are scared to open their computer, or they just, like, their GPU was running great until it wasn't. Let's say they put in an AIO that needs to be rethermal paste or something, like, people, there are tinkerers. I love to tinker. It's not really as much of an issue for me, but for some people it's a big issue. That's something that they try to avoid, and why they're not as embraced, why they're more tepid on the PC ecosystem, or they get in or they come out for a while. When streaming first came in, a lot of people jumped pretty heavy on PCs, but I know people that were kind of hardened out of it, where they had enough rough situations, their hardware aged out, and they were like, do I want to build this again? Or I didn't take off on my streams on Twitch the way I thought I would. Do I even care about pursuing this aspect anymore? Or do I just want something to have fun on and play games? But then they've already had some ecosystem, some, buy into the Steam ecosystem and library. They have a bit of a library and they don't want to abandon that, but they're also like, I don't want the headache. And whatever. I think I said to you before, I used to like argue against these people when I was younger and naive. And then I realized I don't care about phones. Like I'm an open ecosystem person most of the time, except when it comes to phones. I don't want to think about my phone. I had Androids that gave me headaches for a while. I have an iPhone and I don't care about it. I never play games on it. It's just a phone. I don't want to think about it.
I don't play games on it ever. Yeah.
I don't want to think about it. And everyone's going to have things that they don't want to think about. And for some people, it's their PC gaming. So is there an ecosystem where this could do well enough? Sure. It could create a nice ground floor, and especially the way that if more AAA developers at least have it boot into a Steam profile. One of my best friends, he reached out to me when Requiem came out, and he was like, "Why you have it on PC? Why are you playing it on PS5?" And I told him because the HDR and the audio kept getting messed up when I played it on PC. And the worst thing about Windows to this day for anyone is that I do multiplayer game with my friends. You can see it in this ecosystem. This is my desktop where I game with my friends. I have my LG OLED and home theater behind me. When you put headphones in on your PC, it turns off all of your surround sound settings. And you have to manually re-engage it every single time you plug headphones into your computer. Is that a fun experience? You put in the game on PS5 and
even that Xbox Series X behind you, it's just gonna work. Yeah.
And the HDR just works. You balance it, it works. On PC, I was playing Armored Core on it recently and it just went gray for no reason. On my display through HDR, I had to flick off and on my HDR settings on my PC to get it over and over again. Some people just don't want that kind of headache. And these are things that specifically the things that a Steam machine can solve. They can solve the most frustrating aspects of it. And am I going to play the heaviest games that I have on it? Probably not. But is there a subset of games that I have in my Steam library where if I had that device, would I just play it on it happily? Sure. So I'm hoping it gets 10, 20 million sales. That'd be great. Because
I hope it's incredibly, again, I want this to be like, I'm not saying this is what it will be at this point, but like $450, no controller, $550 with a controller, undercuts PS5, gives you PS5 experience, establishes Steam as a major competitor a year before the PS6 comes out at probably an aggressive price. And Helix, Helix is coming for Valve's neck. I'm telling people, like with their SDK and GDK plans here. Like, I hope they get a fertile ground where like there really is this competition in software against Windows and Helix and competition against hardware for the budget space against PlayStation 6. I hope it succeeds absolutely. And what you're describing is how maybe it would, Well,
I'm just saying the problems with PC that it can fix. And that's the advantage it has. And even if it can, let's say it can wake your desktop from sleep to stream to that device, that could be cool. Just leave your PC sleeping downstairs and then it streams upstairs to your Steam machine and you can play with the exact same visuals and hopefully the compression beats what you would get online. That would be cool too. There's something to be said. I mean, the Nvidia Shield did surprisingly well, basically being that, and the hardware in there was laughable, especially compared to a Steam machine. So is there an ecosystem for it? Sure. Is a media center as a, if it can fix the biggest problems of PC and then give accessibility to people's computers in some other place in their house, it could be a great extension to your main desktop PC as well. So I'm hoping I'm hoping it gets a ground floor for gaming. It sells well and it gets to be a good, like a little module that, is like a Wi-Fi range booster or something. You plug it in another spot in your house and you get your desktop in more places than one without having to build multiple desktops all over the place. That could be a really, really cool feature for it. And for lightweight games, if it can run it locally at, 45 watts instead of 600 watts on your PC downstairs, that's also great. Knowing which games are lightweight or not and which ones you could run environmentally more friendly is not a terrible thing either.
All right, let me move on to this question here from Chris Bezozio. He says, "Hi, Tom and Bryan. Do you still believe the PS6 will release between 2027 to early 28? After a VGC journalist question to Hiroki Totoki, the relevant quote is, Hiroki said, we have not yet decided on at what timing we will launch the new console or at what prices. This is what the translator said. So we would like to really observe and follow the situation. Looking at the current circumstances, the memory price is also expected to be very high, at least over the next year or so, because there will still be shortages of supply. So under that assumption, we must think carefully about what we're going to do. Now, I want to say this before letting you loose. I meant to bring this up on a few recent podcasts, but I didn't manage to. The funny thing about this quote is I would have used this 3 months ago to prove that I'm right about when the PS6 is coming out. Not that because some people are like, oh, it's going to come out 2029, and my point the whole time is when people say, I got really annoyed, honestly, when I saw that one leak that was like, Sony hasn't decided things with like RAM and exact release date yet. And I'm like, well, duh, we're not. It's like 2025. They don't decide that until like a year before they launch it, or maybe even 8 months. And them saying here, they're still having to decide things. Yes, they're still having to decide things. They will decide this next year. But I wanted to make my piece on that because for me, when I see this, I'm like, yep, that's what I said. They haven't decided yet. But what do you think about the PlayStation 6? Because, I mean, I know that they're manufacturing it mid next year, so I don't think they can hold it for more than a year from that point.
They could hold it for a year. They could
a year, but not more than that, because otherwise you're filling up.
Then you're just paying the storage on it is hurting your margins at that point in time. So I don't know.
So early mid 28 at the latest. Yeah,
I have no inside information on this. For me, it's I hope they can come out earlier. I think Sony caused themselves a major dilemma. So I'm not going to guess when it comes out.
Sure.
I will hear murmurings from friends that I work at publishers and things sometime when it's there. I'm not hearing any of that right now. So I don't think that it's very soon. So I don't.
Well, it's not this year. I've seen people ask me that too. It's like, no, it's not this year.
I have no basis to assume it's going to come out within the next 12 months. And I probably wouldn't say it if I did know. But
to
be fair, I don't want to burn any bridges. I do think Sony has a bit of a crazy dilemma. And I think releasing their games on PC hurt their, I'm going to say, mystique.
Yes, it did a lot. Yeah.
So what happened historically is Sony fanboys would, and I love them, I'm not meaning to complain. I remember when I was super big into PC hardware and Xbox 360 hardware and PS3, and games were looking worse on PS3, like every game that shipped. And I had a PS3 fanboy, great friend, just would not give in that it was the most powerful piece of hardware on earth for all history, was so in love with the cell and its capabilities. And I was explaining GPUs and shaders and how memory bandwidth works and all of these things, and how, the 360 is more powerful in these ways, these GPUs are more powerful in these ways. Wouldn't hear it. The PlayStation was magically more powerful. And he would just point to games. He would say, hey, whatever, Uncharted looks better than your games here. Ratchet and Clank looks better than your games here. And now what we have is Uncharted and Ratchet and Clank and Last of Us on PC. In fact, I think 60% of Hardware Unboxed video runs are the Sony.
That's something I might want to get into. The amount of benchmarking of PlayStation exclusives that no one bought on PC is hilarious to me, actually. But
did Sony turn into the ashes of the singularity by accident?
Yes.
By
ashes
releasing
of the benchmark.
Yeah, this is the thought, is there was a mystique, because good art direction can massively outperform the hardware. And we've seen this you could argue God of War 2016, before it shipped on anything else, looked better than any game on PC when it came out. The same year it came out, you could argue the same thing about most other games. Ratchet and Clank is still probably the closest thing to a Pixar movie that came out in terms of running visuals on your computer. And that's why it's used as a benchmark, and it looks good. If it never shipped on PC, the mystique would still exist. You'd be like, ray tracing looks better on this than it does on all of these other games on this PlayStation, than all these PC games, because the art direction is stronger. So they've killed this by shipping their single player games on PC to some extent, because now you can just watch a video comparing it, or you can see, the Digital Foundry literally lists the settings. Hey, here's the list of the settings. We pinpointed it. It's high here. It's medium here. It's ultra here, actually, but it's low here. And then they show the exact barrage of settings that are done to make that PlayStation game look the way that it does. Sony needs to get that back, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if you can put the cat back in
Genie
the
back in the
bag.
bottle, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you can, because there was something about that guesswork that kind of made console ecosystems thrive. That, hey, you could have these kind of arguments and you can play, well, this looks better than this, even though the hardware in PC is more capable. And if you have a really powerful team with catered art direction, you can get there. And Sony showed that for a long time, over and over again, but they lost that with the PS5 by shipping these things multi-platform. I had friends that were both forever, played PC, played PS5, and they sold their PS5s after because they were like, well, the game's going to come out a year on PC anyways, I can wait a year. And then they were probably interested in other games and didn't even buy it when it came out on PC at that point in time. So I don't know.
Well, a lot of those people are a little mad right now because I'm communicating that from what a lot of it's other rumors from other people, like Jason Schreier is a really good track record. But like he was saying that he's hearing that PlayStation's going to focus on exclusives more next gen. And more so what I'm seeing behind the scenes is that the PlayStation 6 is probably going to be really good at doing a lot of things very few people's PCs can do for a couple of years. Like, I mean, they're like you said earlier, the restarting production of the 30, 60, 12 gigabyte, that's not going to run any of the ray tracing titles, AI titles, if they really push it, that the PS6 can do. And so it's like a good time to actually have more exclusives, to bring that mystique back. Like, if this is the gen to do that. But I've seen a lot of people in the comments with this reporting going, what? I just sold my PS5 because I thought they wouldn't have exclusives anymore. And I blame Sony's poor communication, because this is something, I don't know if you've heard me, this rant. This is something I've been harping about a lot in the past, I don't know, month or so, which is that the exclusive strategy Sony had with the PlayStation 5 was really the worst of both worlds. You lose the mystique and you have the perception of no exclusives, even though you do have some. And then on the one hand, on PC, you don't recoup any of the costs. Like, what is one of the few games that sold incredibly well on PC? Helldivers 2. And people would say, well, that's a good audience. No, it's because it launched on the same day, guys. If you don't,
a multiplayer game. 100% multiplayer games should be multi-platform.
But I'm pushing back that it's just that. Because if you launch Death Stranding 2 on PlayStation and then tell PC gamers to wait for 6 months, they wait 6 months and then it launches for $70 and they say, why the fuck would I pay $70 for a 6-month-old game? It's not new. I'm going to go play Resident Evil 9. And this pattern Sony had of just like, we don't know when it's coming to PC. So what you have is the people that are likely to only get a PlayStation if they need to have the perception that there's no exclusives. Even though right now you cannot get Demon's Souls. You will never get Ghost of Yota, I think, on PC. You're not getting these games on PC. And yet they think you can. But then because those people think you can, they're not getting any of those sales on PC. They're also not buying it on PlayStation. I even put out a poll on my YouTube channel. I'll put up the latest results. Where did we get? 5,000 votes, so quite a sample size. And it was like, have you ever skipped or further delayed buying a PlayStation PC release because your hype dissipated by the time it finally came to PC? 37% said, yes, I've done this many times. 16% yes says they've done it at least once. And like 13% is like, yeah. And then there's a 34% that's I always wait to buy a game, like many years. But it's like, well, okay, but then those sales are like $20, not the full price of the game. So why do you want to sell it to that person anyway?
Yeah.
And so you're looking at a situation here where over like, I think, what is that? 53% of people aren't getting these games because they tell themselves they'll wait for it to come to PC and then they don't buy it because it's the hype factor is gone. And I just think Sony didn't calculate, and it's really like a 3D chess concept that this has happened, but I just don't think they play. And so I think they've realized that like it's got to be day and date or it shouldn't come to PC unless it's like a really special release of Demon's Souls eventually 10 years after it came out. Like, whatever, that doesn't really matter. That's not going to hurt anything.
Maybe I'm just an old man, but there's I wanted to be clear about one thing first.
Sure.
There's a part of me that is, from a pro-consumer standpoint, is like, why not release these things on PC?
And I agree.
But the part of me that is thinking of PlayStation as a company that's trying to survive, if I was giving advice to them, is what's saying you killed your mystique. They're different thought processes. And I mean, if Sony is on PC, the problem is they're losing their 20-30% of their game sales to Steam. as well, which was their extra profit. So there's less incentive because Steam's overhead is not it's not amazing. I think it's earned in a lot of cases, so I'm not going to badmouth Steam on it, but it's it is hefty, and these companies, I don't know if they give Sony a discount in terms of that, but it's hard to know. But when it comes to like a console ecosystem, consoles felt a lot more special in the past. The more every UI became the same and became less of an extension of the game itself and more just some menu thing with a bunch of rectangles in it, like the iPhoneification, I guess, of hardware. Like everyone can remember booting a PS1 or a PS2 or GameCube or Xbox and just getting like bombarded by a sound effect and it rolling and playing with you, and it gave you a vibe before the game even played. The PS1 like intro sound effect. We've gone so far away from that consoles feel interchangeable now, because the second you boot it, it's the same thing. You have some menu with a bunch of icons that you're going to pick it and you're going to go from there. And that was all part of what made the hardware was. It used to have like a picture of the entire hardware that it was selling in every aspect of it. And we've lost that with each generation that we've gone forward. So even like the PS3 had its like operatic thing at the beginning before it started, just something to give you a little vibe about whatever the console was. Yeah. And I get with modern convenience, you don't always want these kind of things going at you, but I think all of these things hurt the feel of how unique a piece of hardware is and what it's offering you. So Sony has to try to get that back. I don't know whether the PS6 is going to release in a reasonable period of time, but I think I know what hurt their brand more than anything else. And I think it's just that mind share. You need fanboys that love your stuff, that are advocating and evangelizing for your product all over the place. Nvidia has that. Steam has that. And I think what happened is that a lot of those people jump ship to Steam, and it'll be hard to get them back. So I guess it's another argument for the Steam machine.
Well, so there's one more thing I want to add on here too with the exclusives argument, because I want to be clear. My argument isn't just like they've made it confusing. I believe that, and again, I want to be clear. This is blowing my mind. I mean, I was a person, when it comes to exclusives, what I want is just more games and competition. And I think sometimes exclusives increase that. I mean, what is it? Bayonetta 2 only exists because Nintendo funded it. So are we really going to complain that Nintendo funded a game that wouldn't have existed otherwise? I mean, good for them. That's very cool. And I think there's a lot of examples of that. Not enough recently. But there was this perception 10 years ago that everything had to be multi-platform because costs were going up and you won't recoup, whatever, unless you're on every platform. And I actually think there's evidence now emerging that is blowing my mind that this isn't true, actually. If you look at the sales of some of these games, and yes, a lot of it's because of what we've gone through, it's confusing the release schedule. But like if you release, I'm trying to remember what it was, but like one of their most successful games on PC was like, I think Ghost of Tsushima, which is one of the first ones. And I believe it only sold like 10% to 20% more copies on PC. So I'm like, let me get this straight. You just spent all this money porting this game, supporting it with updates on, I think, Epic and Steam, which is really like supporting two different platforms. And you made 10%, 20% more money. And now Valve is getting a 30% cut. How many people would have 5% of that extra 20% of just 10%, or half of them actually just bought it on PlayStation if it never came to PC? And then Sony would have gotten a 30% higher cut. I mean, I think there's a lot of evidence actually that when it comes to PlayStation games, they don't make more money because they came to PC. Like, and so this argument of like, well, anyone should be able to play it, that's nice. But if it loses the company's money half the time, not all the time, Helldivers 2 did well, then I think you just have to be much more tactical in which games are exclusives and which are not, because it turns out half of them might lose more money than they make if you go multi-platform.
Well, I made this argument with Xbox Game Pass on one of the previous Broken Silicons. It never made sense to include their AAA library into it. So it's hard to find the balance between these things. But these companies are finding themselves in, as they open up, they don't see the downsides of opening the way that they have. They're looking at all of these potential upsides without realizing what hurts their brand. I think it was Satoru Iwata, the former president of Nintendo who passed away, that at it was like a shareholder meeting where people were yelling at him, why aren't you doing, like, selling your Nintendo stuff here and doing this and putting all your games on phone here? And he's like, well, we could make a fortune tomorrow if we opened up your properties the way that you're saying, and then we'd kill all of our properties. Basically, he said like something in the tune of that we're focused on preserving these brands so that they last for as long as humanly possible. And you can do things that chase short-term financial influx at the cost of the entire reputation of your brand or your IPs or mascots.
This piece of content is brought to you by JLC PCB. Innovation starts with an idea, and JLC PCB helps you bring your ideas to life. They handle every step with precision, speed, and at a reasonable cost, especially when it comes to their 6-layer PCBs. On that last point, their 6-layer PCBs allow fast, clean routing and avoid the struggle of squeezing signals onto their usual 2 or 4-layer boards. More routing means more freedom and faster development, fewer redesigns, and therefore quicker project completions. Spend less time fighting routing limits and more time building the actual projects. And 6-layer PCBs are usually expensive, but JLC PCB offers one of the most affordable industry prices. So whether you're a maker, an engineer, or a global hardware company, JLC PCB empowers you to turn your ideas into a reality faster and smarter. Support Moore's Law is dead through the link below. Yes, just clicking on the link below helps the channel a ton, but obviously if you need their services, you can also get a really great price on 6-layer PCBs as well if you follow the directions and use the offer codes and coupons below. So please support Moore's Law is dead at JLC PCB today. And I was one of those people. Probably in an episode you were on years ago that was like, yeah, Nintendo, not all of them. And I actually still kind of think this, like, you really can't bring Pokemon Yellow to Steam. I mean, come on, like this is just put that on the App Store. Really, like $10. You can charge $10 for this game. Everyone's emulating anyways, even though they're certainly trying to stop that. And you know how many people on iPhones are going to buy that? I mean, like, what are you out of your mind not doing that with at least everything before the DS? But at the same time, I have to begrudgingly admit, I mean, and not just because it's kind of working for Nintendo and PlayStation's learning a lesson. It's like PlayStation has probably red alarms going off behind the scenes of like, oh, wow, this is actually a problem, a huge problem. And so I still think you could do a little bit of column A and B, but Nintendo was right.
Well, I think Nintendo's right too. We were talking about Game Pass a second ago. Legacy is the other place that is good for a subscription service. I think Nintendo's finding that as well, that you can buy a Switch 2, and as long as you pay for their online service, suddenly you have access to all of these classic games for their entire
Which is kind
library.
of what PlayStation's doing with their streaming service as well.
They're kind of the big problem. Nintendo kind of solved this post 3DS with the Switch when they said essentially out loud, this is the service to bind them all, whereas Sony hasn't said that. And Sony made me buy my games like 3 times already, from like PS3, PS1 classics to PS4 and PS5. There's some games that they gave you and sometimes they didn't, and it was like a haphazard, oh, I suddenly owned Dino Crisis 1 on PS5 because they carried that license for it from when I bought it on PS3, but other games they don't. And it's this weird like, you don't have any consistency. What these subscription services should be for is, as far as I'm concerned, is multiplayer games that make sense, lightweight games, and legacy games. So that's the point in buying into it. And this is an advantage game companies have over services like Netflix or whatnot, because they don't own their libraries most of the time, and everyone's getting sick of the media shuffle, where you're halfway watching a show that's 9 seasons and it's moving away from Amazon Prime to Hulu or whoever, whatever service.
Or nowhere, like Westworld, just nowhere.
It just disappears. Where at least with Xbox, what properties they own. Nintendo, what properties they own. Sony, that. This is the place for.
Well, even Microsoft screwed me over. I had to buy Age of Empires 3 like 3 times because of Games for Windows Live, and then they just didn't honor it. By the way, GameFly honored BioShock Remastered moving to Steam. Microsoft didn't honor Games for Windows Live moving to the Microsoft Store. It's complete bullshit. I mean, so to be fair, Microsoft has burned people like me, and I have a long memory.
I guess I wasn't expecting this conversation to be as much about like ethics and development and sales.
You're a game developer, Bryan. That's I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense, but I'm interested in all of these things, and for me, I just want healthy platforms. The
Yes.
hardest thing as a game developer is shipping to a lukewarm platform where you don't know what's going to happen. You just look at the Vita. The Vita is a really interesting console for that because game developers loved it, but it did not have enough units sold to support them. Mm-hmm. So it was a really fun piece of kit that if you're making a really fun lightweight game, it was a great fit for it, and you wanted to target it because it was so fun to work on. But there wasn't enough people on the other side to warrant it. And as a game developer, you want the platforms to be healthy so you can target them, because targeting them is fun. It's fun to try to make your game work on different pieces of hardware or play it on something different. You've been working in the mines on your game, let's say, for 2 years, and then suddenly you start porting it to something else and you get excited about it again because you're playing it in a different space. It's fun.
You're going into something here that I really want to ask you about. So I was recently on an episode of Sacred Symbols with Colin Moriarty, PlayStation podcast. So frankly, we talked about a lot of things. And he brought up an idea, maybe give myself some credit. I think me, him, and Brad from Punching Up podcast kind of came up with something together as we talked. And it was like, I've long had this theory that PS6 is the perfect time for Sony to kind of, leverage exclusives, like I've teased earlier in this episode, for the reasons of the PlayStation 6 is going to do ray tracing probably in the ballpark of like a 5080 Ti or 5090, whatever. And that's just going to be wildly better than like 99% of PCs out there. Yeah. It's AI performance. I mean, I don't know, just to put things in perspective, to my memory, like a Series S, and actually kind of close to that, I think a Series S is like 16 tops, PS5's 20 tops. The PS5 is actually quite bad at AI performance, the base model. The PS5 Pro is 300 tops. A 9070 XT is 1500 tops. Yeah. And then, like, I don't know what the PS6 will be. I haven't seen the tops performance, but I've seen some simulations, and who knows, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 tops. Like, we are talking like hundreds, like multiple orders of magnitudes better at doing this. And that will also apply to a lot of the graphics cards people have on PC. So this is a generation where like there are just things you can do on the PS6 and Xbox Helix you cannot do on 90% of PCs for years to come.
Yeah, especially with the cost constraints.
And at the same time, Xbox is quite a wild card right now. Like a lot of developers I know are a little worried about. I think they're starting to win them back with the presentations for Helix, but there's some worry there. So like, you're the safe bet. PlayStation is one of the last remaining safe AAA bets. You've got a device that can do things most PCs can't. This is the time to push for tons of exclusives. And an idea Colin Moriarty had is also there's a lot of indie and second-party devs right now that are worried, right? And if this is the time where Sony should be going out there and letting devs bid on their IP. They've got this long catalog of IP, whether it's Killzone, Resistance. I'll throw out some deep cuts.
Parappa the Rappa.
Warhawk, Folklore. Who remembers Folklore? Nobody but me, because I played the demo.
Oh, I know Folklore. I beat the game. It's good.
All right, so what if Sony came out and they're like, our devs are very busy, or Cory Barlog's in God of War Dungeon, just making all of these God of War games. And then we got all, there's probably another Uncharted coming, another Last of Us, another Galactic game. Like our first party devs are busy, but what we do have? We have an IP of like 100 different games that we are wondering who would want to bid on this. And let's say Massive Damage comes in and they're like, we'll bid, we'll make a Folklore. And we think we can do it for this budget. And Sony's like, and we have these AI tools that'll let you make the assets cheaper, not in real time with DLSS5. That is nonsense in my opinion. But, like we have this, like almost like the Nvidia outreach for helping you do you think this is a good idea? Because I thought it was a brilliant one of like leveraging their IP, I believe this is what Sony kind of did with like PS1. Like, is this not a good time for Sony to come out and go, hey, who wants to make use our IP to make an exclusive? Well, our devs are busy making other ones.
It's not that it's a bad idea. It's that there's a lot of I think a hard thing for a lot of small developers to bid on, or even medium size or heavy size. I think we're even seeing this with like the Star Wars property and Ubisoft and EA, that the targets on these IP, the sales targets, are really, really high. So if you can't match the expectations on sales targets, and I know personally a bunch of indie devs that did get license rights to a bunch of games from a major historical player, huge titles, and the games did well. They were actually good games, but they didn't hit the sales expectations of that big company. And they didn't get to make any more games on that, despite the fact that every game they did, review scored extremely well, was loved. When people talk about the series, like, that entry was a really, really good entry in the series. The parent company isn't as interested in doing it again because they just didn't hit their sales targets. Everyone made money. Everyone had a good time.
They didn't lose money. They just didn't crush it.
They didn't crush it. Well, I mean, some of these things, if it's not going to be like one of the indie mega hits, like whatever, Slay the Spire 2 or Risk of Rain 2 or some strange game, then I think there's always a point in really great 100,000 seller games. I think that's like where the most interesting things happen in gaming a lot. But the big companies oftentimes have issues seeing that, I think. So when you're interacting with a big company like Sony, that's the big issue. There's a lot of companies that would love to bid for one of those properties.
Well, and you're probably worried after seeing things like Concord, right? Like, in all these failures. But like with PS3, that's not how Sony operated. They funded Demon's Souls and it sold like 1.5 million copies. I
love Japanese headed Sony. Like Ico Shadow of the Colossus.
It's like they are again. They are kind of again.
Some of those, like even Gravity Rush 2. I love those games. I loved a lot of that era. Even Siren Blood's Curse for PS3 and other weird games. I like when there was experimental. I think that they bid a little too heavy on the same game over and over again. I used to joke, and I felt like making a piece of art about, like, this is like 6 years ago, about like a Sony game versus an Xbox game. Sony game was like someone with a gun. A PlayStation game is like you go to a door, it doesn't open, and there's something to climb right beside it. And then there's just like a million bricks out, and there's every PlayStation game, Uncharted, Last of Us, Spider-Man. Like, it doesn't make a difference. That's what it is. You go to a door, you can't open it. Go up and over. It's like the nature of how they do it. And then they fell deep into that template instead of doing whatever, Sound Hill, Gravity Rush, all the other things. There's only 3 companies in games, I would say, that have like the IP strength to do some really crazy ideas. It's Nintendo, PlayStation, and Capcom. Those are, I wish Xbox would be considered that, but it's kind of hard for me to stretch it to that. They have a lot of properties, but
do they?
I don't know. Like, Capcom has more characters that everyone knows than almost all of these other companies other than Nintendo put together. There's very few.
But you see what I'm saying then? What if next gen, because if you build on the PS6 from the ground up, you can just do ray tracing. To quote Jensen Wang, it just works, and so you save, you don't need to do pre-baked lighting. Sony has like a PlayStation indie or AA dev outreach bundle that is like, no, we have all these new tools that will help you make these assets so much easier. And like, we will partner with you. And if the game sells 2 million copies, well, these new tools allowed you to do it with a team of 10 people. That's fine. You made your money back. And we're finally back to the PS3 mentality that made us dominate for I would say the PS5 still moving on the momentum of the late PS3 gen, to be honest. Like, we know you didn't buy the PS3 for Folklore, but you might have bought it for Folklore and Demon's Souls and Gravity Rush, and then this other person bought it for God of War and Siren Blood Curse. Like understanding that the sum of your parts is greater than all of them individually put together. It's like, that's what made, like, so I just wonder what you think about that idea, because I think it's never been more ripe for this sort of a move.
Hey, if Sony went crazy with exclusives, had lots of developers on board, just bombarded people with games, reviving properties people have loved for forever, is that a successful strategy? Sure. I think that would be amazing. Is it? I don't know if I don't know if I trust a lot of developers. I mean, we're at the point, we're old enough now that I don't know if I trust developers with their own franchises anymore. I personally don't trust Final Fantasy in the hands of Square Enix. That's me, and maybe I'm wrong. That's my opinion, but I haven't loved anything since Hironobu Sakaguchi walked out those doors. Every game that he did, I loved, and every game after I didn't. And we're at this point too, where it's whose hands do you trust with these things? So you got to be very careful. Is it a good idea if you give it in the right hands of the right developers? Hey, like I didn't love the Medium and Bloober's games prior to Silent Hill 2, but they, despite technical issues and engine problems, they did really, really good with Silent Hill 2. So if you pair it with the right studio and you release it, can you release something pretty special? Totally. It's just that amount of curation can be a difficult task, finding the right hands for each of these franchises. If they want to do it and they want to make it exclusive, could it be a super successful strategy? Sure. It's not going to hit every time. It's going to be hit or miss. You're going to have some things where people get excited for something and it really doesn't land, and you'll have other ones where it lands really well. And but if they're exclusive, it might draw people to it. So it is a strong idea for them to get behind. But
as a game dev, would that, not as a gamer, as a game dev, would that make you excited? Like
if Sony came to our doors and they said, "Hey, we have these properties. These are them. Make a pitch you want to bid on." Yeah. Make a pitch for them. If you get it, it's whatever. Let's say it's
in which IP would you want Massive Damage to work on? That's my other question.
That's a different question. I would know. I think I could do a really killer JRPG version of something classic. I think that would be pretty fun. Sorry. If I was to continue what I was saying with what PlayStation, they came to the doors and they said to devs, "Hey devs, this is your rev share. We've calculated it out. It's reasonable. It's not overly favoring us to the point where you're not going to make any money." Because what happens with devs that attach themselves to these, and I've seen it with a lot of these smaller projects, is that they give themselves, the indie dev takes an unfavorable rev share on a project that probably won't make enough money back for them. And they're just hoping it's successful enough that they get the notoriety to make a game that they make money on next time. And it can't be that situation. So if they have a situation where it's like, we're covering the dev costs, do a pitch, let us play it. Here's the deadline for the pitch. This is the rev share. It's reasonable for both of us. Is that a killer idea? Yeah, but all of that stuff has to be forethought. It has to be worked out in advance. This is going to work for you as a gamer. We've decided our strategy is great, but it's taking 4 years to ship all of these games. We like them, but we're not getting enough breadth. We have all of these here, like Parappa's open, Jammer's open. We got... do you want to do a Metroidvania based on Bloodborne? Whatever. Like, talk to us about it. We'll go on that. Hey, Bloodborne HD 2D.
Well, we know it can't be Bloodborne
like
because
Octopath-esque Blood. That would be pretty sweet.
But like, for example, like what if IO, like they just bid for 007? What if IO, who makes Hitman, is like, we bid and we're going to make a Siphon Filter?
Yeah.
Why not? Why not do that?
Yeah,
like, why not have like one of the secondary studios or teams at DICE goes, we bid, we're going to do a $40 Warhawk game.
Bring back a Mega Boost.
Yeah. Like, I'm just like, like Capcom bids, they're like, we'll make a Siren Blood Curse. Why not? Like, I'm just, and the deal is like, we're going to help you do it easier with our new tools. You only have to focus on this one platform. And it's safe. We don't know what the hell's going on with Helix. We don't even know if that thing still runs Steam. We really still don't. And it's like the pitch is, this is the safe bet and we'll help you. It's an idea Colin Moriarty had in conjunction with my idea of the ease of development next gen. And I really wonder if, I don't know. I think it's an interesting idea.
I think it needs to be more paired to engines. There's one thing about shipping your games onto hardware. There's another thing about integrating engines into hardware. I know Sony owns part of Epic Games. I don't know how much they own. I know that they bought to invest into them in the past. One of the questions further down was talking about Epic's new animation tools that are built into Unreal Engine. I mean, game developers deal with bonkers stuff all the time. We need better tools. We need engines to integrate more and more of these features. It's hard because that's kind of like an anti-competitive stance. You would kind of hope that you would have alternate engines, like, I don't know, if Capcom opened RE Engine or other people opened up some other engines.
Well, Decima has been opened up by Sony many times, so they've already got
very narrowly to very specific hands, like just the Until Dawn developers.
That's funny you say that too. Think of what that would be too. Like, that would be such another interesting play if they're like, not only will we help you make it, you get access to Decima now. And by making the devs work on Decima, you're kind of capturing them to keep working with you in the future, right?
Yeah, that's actually what you just said there. That's probably, if you did that, if you gave them like a leading edge tool system, the biggest problem is what that does to Guerrilla Games. Because look, we're talking about Valve earlier. Valve used to be a game developer.
Yeah.
But they created one of the biggest digital ecosystems for games, and it's very difficult for them to manage that.
Yeah, as a big Killzone fan, I'd feel bad if Guerrilla made less games. Having said that, I would take them making less games if 10 other studios use their tools to make more games.
Well, the thing is the same people that are building their engine tech that does really, really awesome things would then become support for their engine.
Then tools. Hire more people, Sony. That's what I would say.
I think you get into the point where really, really good rendering tech engineers are pretty far between. You get a lot of devs. There's a lot of great devs that, build gameplay systems or whatnot, but there's very few people that you let touch your renderer at almost any of these game studios. Their conversations are super interesting. I've sat at tables with them, and they're really cool people. They know so much more than I could even begin to fathom about those aspects of how games are built, but they're not as common. So the worry with something like that is that can they scale effectively? And then you can scale in a way where, let's say you have a killer engineer and you hire these people that are supposed to be 3 or 4 good engineers, and then that killer engineer ends up doing his work and all of their other work, or however many people's work, right? His or her. You can end up in these situations where scaling goes poorly. It's hard to hire the
You're going
right
to kill
people.
me for saying this. Maybe those devs at Guerrilla could use AI to help them scale.
I with rendering tech, where AI works
with support.
I know. I'm just saying, like, where AI works the best is where information is the most aggregated. So wherever the deeper you are in a forum on like 16 pages of a thread trying to figure out how to make one little aspect of a feature work in your game, the chance that AI is going to solve that problem is currently like 0. The chance it's going to write like the bulk of your
I don't mean for writing
there's
code.
a million documents.
I don't mean for that. I mean for support, though. You could have the AI much more quickly summarize 10 people complaining to one guy and like help with diagnosing what it is for the final hive mind guy to controlling everything to go, okay.
Hey, let's say I meet you halfway. If you have like an AI interface where people talk into it and it aggregates and creates the right solution for one developer to like one render tech developer to build tools for. So it builds the right tool, because the biggest mismatch I see a lot in game development is when devs don't understand what's being asked for and build a tool that's slightly off from what it is. And then the back and forth between trying to hone that tool to work the way that it's supposed to. And if there was a not an engine AI median piece of software that aggregated that information and was able to assess and create a more accurate way to communicate to a developer so that you maximize their time, is there something there? Yeah.
Which is what I'm pretty much talking about. I'm not talking about them finding the tiniest thing outside of maybe, I don't know, playtesting or something.
Yeah, I know. It's the way these things go, right? So...
Well, speaking of AI, though, let's talk about less AI. This piece of content is brought to you by the Minis Forum M2 Mini PC, a mini PC with an ultra-portable tiny body that is ready for far more than where it starts. Although it does start with an Intel Ultra 7 356H that has an NPU with 50 tops and a GPU with 40 tops, but you can expand this thing a ton despite its size. It goes up to dual-channel DDR5, 128 gigabytes of RAM, and has support for dual NVMe SSDs, PCIe 4.0 for up to 8 terabytes of storage in total, and it comes included with Intel Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 5.4, dual 2.5 gigabit Ethernet LAN, and of course, it has a ton of ports for plugging in whatever you need. So if you're interested in this product, please follow the link below to support the channel. Clicking on that link helps a bunch, but of course, purchasing it helps even more. You can use offer code BrokenSilicon to save $30 off it if you do want to purchase it. So once again, support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out the Minis Forum M2 Mini PC today. I want to pivot here a little bit to Xbox. I don't know if you saw Asha Sharma tweet that they're getting rid of Copilot in Xbox. There's clearly this huge thing behind the scenes where they were going to like, and I've for a while been sounding the alarms. I'm like, Microsoft, if you go on stage next year and you say, or probably this year because they're so aggressive about it, and you go AI, Copilot, Copilot, Copilot instead of TV like Xbox One, I'm like, it's going to be Xbox One all over again. But Asha Sharma just said that they're killing Copilot for console, that initiative right now. And I think that's awesome. But I don't know if you saw that, if you have any thoughts on that. If you think
I saw that.
Okay.
Well, I don't know whether it's misleading or not. I don't.
Right.
If they want to talk, I'll talk to them. But I think it's the right move. I mean, people have been. Microsoft is at a really tough situation right now. I think both on console and on PC.
Yes.
I think their satisfaction is dropped pretty
rock bottom.
That I've seen more people switch to Linux than have switched to Linux in the past, or more interested in it, and or switch off to whatever, even Mac or something like that. Copilot is a feature that's going to be heavier on your resources in a situation where they need to get lighter weight. Mm-hmm. Does it have to be Copilot where they go lighter weight? Not necessarily, but they need to get lighter weight because they're getting killed by bloat in their ecosystems. They need to streamline these things, make them more functional, direct, work appropriately, bug-free. I am the most frustrated with Microsoft personally. I have been in a long time. I switched GPUs. I have custom memory timings on all of my PC that's been stable for forever. I had a slight undervolt on my CPU, right? I had tuned my PC. It was stable, played everything, no problem. And I switched, but Microsoft Update came the same day as my switch, and I didn't realize that. I turned off all of my memory timings. I turned off, my computer would not get stable no matter what I did. I rolled back the Windows Update, perfectly stable. I was able to turn all of my memory timings back on. I would tune all my timings. I was able to put my undervolt on. Every game is stable again. Everything is stable. They've had a bad run with stability in their ecosystem, people pointing fingers at them. And also the Steam Deck punches above its weight in regards to the Windows handhelds, and people can see that because the Windows is just so much heavier to run, and it's less satisfying and it's less direct. There's so many things where you get blocked. Their pin system, I don't know what the heck they're doing with their pin system, where sometimes you get caught in loops trying to install Windows, and then you have to format and do it again because it for some reason rejects your pin, and then I had to go through that with a friend. It just did. And there's oh, well, we have to format. And we did. And then it was fine. But why would you ever come into an endless death loop without an option out of it? Literally at some point, they'd be can you log in another way? Can we create this later? Can we delete the folder? Some people are telling you to go to a command prompt, go find the folder, literally DOS your way through folders and, command prompt CD/this and get all back in this day and age to delete a folder because Microsoft won't correct its pin issue unless you do that, or you just reinstall Windows. These kind of issues you can't get away with right now when there's some strong competition on the rise. Steam is proving themselves. Apple
Neo, if you want a budget laptop,
Well, look at Apple's transition to their own ARM chips compared to when Microsoft tried to open up their ecosystem to include ARM. You could
it's night and day.
You could do seminars about the difference between those two experiences in terms of making a translation layer that perfectly covers all of these use cases on the Apple side to the point where people didn't even care that they were switching. I'm not an Apple fanboy at all. I've never touched Macs. I get irritated by closed systems. So for me, I've never enjoyed the Mac experience because the second I think their transition was way smoother. I think Microsoft could learn a lot from it. So they're in a tough spot. They need to bring back what made Xbox. What made Xbox what it was that it was always the most powerful hardware you could buy as a console.
No,
And
it wasn't always the most powerful. Xbox, the first one was, and then after that, it's up for debate.
The 360 was from the graphics standpoint, but they had a hard time marketing it. They did launch it was a half a year, a year before the PS3.
Yeah, by the end of that generation, you had Battlefield games looking significantly worse. Every game was on 6 discs. It can't even actually technically output 1080p, is my understanding.
They launched the worst one, the one where they lost I'd say their mind share was the original one when they launched the Xbox One. And then they didn't have as much mind share, and they didn't have as many exclusives as well by the time they shipped S and X. So they're hurting on those fronts.
Well, they're in a real, what is it, like a lack of they're like, I don't know, I'm forgetting the term, but like they've lost their like soul. They don't know what their soul is anymore. Well, and I think they're trying to figure it out.
There was action and fun and really good graphics and impressive physics. Like if I remember what made me want an Xbox, and I was working at Blockbuster at the time when the original Xbox came out, and you would see the people that would rent all of these types of games, and I'd look at all the boxes on my shifts and see, and they had a cool partnership with Sega where they had Gun Valkyrie, and there was like 3, Shenmue 2, and they had Crazy Taxi 3. They made a Capcom partnership where they got they did the exclusive Dino Crisis, and they did a special version of Onimusha. They did like a bunch of things where they had little aside things and partnerships with certain developers. And they had Otogi and Otogi 2. They had more exclusives. They had these specific companies that they made partnership, and they did it to an interesting degree as well with the Xbox 360, like their Mistwalker partnership, where they got Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey exclusive to that. Those partnerships were super interesting, and you got really interesting games out of them. I love when hardware vendors partner with really good developers and fund operations where that developer feels more free than they've been.
Which is what I was just proposing for the PS6. I think.
Well, it has to come with money for that, right? Like clout and money. So there's a difference between like opening up properties and letting indies or other people bid over them. And there's another thing with where I'm talking about where those hardware vendors targeted Sega or Capcom or FromSoft, right? That's where Dark Souls and Demon Souls came from. Well, Demon Souls and Bloodborne especially. But you have these partnerships where they were targeted and they gave them money. Here's money. You're more free than you normally are. Build something crazy for us. And I think that the other thing that's missing is that in the last 10 years, it's been build this safe thing for us. I miss the build something crazy for us.
Yeah. It's lacking all over the place. And that's why I think a big part of who wins next gen, which, I know PlayStation will probably outsell Xbox no matter what, whatever. But like, whoever it will be perceived to have overperformed next gen is going to be who does what you're saying and what I'm saying. Like, who goes out there and is like, make this game for Helix? Who goes out there and is like, anyone got ideas? Make our game. I think that outreach, and I hope we see Microsoft do that, and not in a way where they're just like, hey, BioShock's coming out, we're going to pay you to not put it on PS3 for a year, but like actually fund new games. And I guess we'll see what happens with Microsoft. They're in a really odd spot there. I mean, it sounds like you're happy that they're not going to focus on AI as much. By the way, they would have misread the room so much if they focused on AI in their marketing.
Like I said, they just have to go lighter weight. Like if they did that with cutting other things, whatever, it depends. Is it bringing utility or people interacting with it or not? So if it's not bringing utility, then I'm glad the hardware is there, because if it turns out neural decompression or something is something really great in the future, we want to go that way. And a lot of problems we talk about in games are a byproduct of rasterization outright, that we sort things into a grid of pixels, and then aliasing is such an issue because it's not organic. A camera caught at 1080p does not look like a game at 1080p because you sift things into pixels when you make a game. Whereas a camera will catch that a part of you, your edge, is part in one pixel and part in another pixel and gradiate between those. But because geometry is hard edged and it finds the pixel that it's in, you're always going to have problems with these things. So whether we get into Gaussian splats or whatever we do for the future, I don't think it's going to be AI hallucinated frames to the same extent, because the main issue with that is where's ground truth. you see this if you ever, most people probably seen videos of someone generating videos or whatnot. And then when if they have a camera turn, the funniest thing is if there's a person walking towards the camera here,
like if you ever
and then they turn the camera and then they're walking behind them, it's a different person on the other side of them. Have
you ever generated an image and told it to zoom out and then there's just nonsense around the original image? Like that's like it couldn't guess even another 10 feet without it just turning into complete nonsense.
It'd be funny if you're playing like Resident Evil 9 and there's someone like when you're in that first rainy scene and someone's walking towards the camera and you turn around and it's not the same person anymore. They've just completely changed their persistence. You need a ground truth in terms of developing. And is rasterization, perfect and going to be the be all and end all? Probably not. There's going to be some paradigm shift at some point. I don't know what it is. There has to be a better solution. It's just, I don't think we have it yet. So whether it's what we're training everything towards right now. And maybe we could have a version of it that is much more stable, remembers things a lot better, holds cues, and creates a ground truth in terms of your engine, your workspace, because it's the most important thing, that you have editability and ground truth in your workspace. It's not something that's coming after the fact, because you can shift it or push it in all sorts of directions or do a layer on top of it that renders and equalizes things if you have a ground truth, but we don't have that currently. So we're in an interesting space between hardware, between ray tracing, path tracing. We don't know how difficult these things are, whether they're going to get more scalable on hardware. Hopefully path tracing does, but then we still have aliasing as a problem. So I don't know. We have more stuff to do, but hopefully we get games looking and running the way that we want in the future. And we have healthy ecosystems where game developers feel like if they fail, it wasn't the platform. That's the big thing. Game developers just want to be able to make the game and not be afraid that, it's going to fall apart because of decisions they made along the way or partnerships. And
that's my argument. PlayStation would be smart if they came out and said, this is the safe bet, actually. Just put it on the PS6 and we'll help you. And Microsoft is what they're trying to do is kind of the other side of that coin. They're like, actually, our GDK, our SDK platform is the easiest ever. And just build it for Helix. And then there's like a switch you almost flip to make it be supported on PC. They're kind of trying to make the argument, we're the easiest. It's very interesting, but they're making it in two different ways, PlayStation and Xbox, next gen, I think.
Well, they have been a very easy ecosystem to develop for a long time. Like Xbox Tools has been great. It's more so that they weren't able to hold the ground on the other end in terms of guaranteeing the market on the other side to grab the product to the same degree that we needed. Or not, I'm not saying like, I'm talking game developers in general, not me in particular, or my company. It's just, you have these situations. And when Microsoft when they first opened Game Pass and they're doing a lot of partnerships where they were giving money to those, you saw really cool projects that came off of that. But like I think even the original Hollow Knight was originally a partner. Yeah. There was a bunch of games that were built out of that partnership, and those developers got so much more freedom because they didn't have to worry as much about their development costs. And that's where they've done best. They just need to have a healthy ecosystem on the other side to catch you. And the thing is, on PC, we don't really associate Steam with Microsoft in that ecosystem. They had something with Game Pass, but it was a half functioning ecosystem as far as I'm concerned, that, like I was saying, it shouldn't have had their first party AAA stuff in it. It should have been focused on multiplayer, retro, and some lightweight stuff. I think that would have been a fun service, but I don't know, like, we got to get these Xbox has got to be a lot healthier next gen for sure, because I honestly, I think the Series X is a really cool piece of kit. Every time I turn it on, I have a lot of fun with it, and then I'm like, why? It's been 8 months since I turned it on. I wish I had more reasons to turn this machine on. And that's kind of sad, because I think they actually did a really, really solid job on the engineering with it. Runs super cool. Quick resume is a really cool feature where you can just... I didn't turn it on for 6 months, and I went into a game and I loaded a game exactly where I was, and I'm like, what the heck was I doing here? It just remembered exactly where I was in that game. That's cool. But anyways.
Masson, Pahovich writes in and says, could it make sense for Xbox to allow Steam on the Helix, but charge less for first-party games on their store to incentivize customers to get people to spend money there? And said, they technically wouldn't be losing too much since they wouldn't be paying themselves for the 30%. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be skeptical of that. But I'm wondering where you come down on this, because I continue to be of the opinion that there's something we don't know about Steam being supported or not supported on Helix that they're not telling us. You see all of these journalists going out there and saying, well, and of course it will run Steam, even though there's not one single comment saying this thing is going to run Steam explicitly. And I feel like either it won't, or if it does, it's going to be like Steam big picture mode. It's going to work well. It's going to be optimized on Helix. And then if you want to run Steam, you have to alt tab out of it effectively and have the cumbersome Windows experience. And that's why they assume you probably just won't use Steam, something like that. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Steam will be there in front and center when you boot it up. I just find it unlikely. But what do you think they're going to do?
I don't know. If they put Steam front and center, they lose their own mind share.
Exactly. They can't.
They want people to be associating it with them. If the first thing you open on an Xbox is Steam, then the goodwill is going to go to Valve, not to Microsoft.
It's a good point.
And Microsoft has a problem, though, like what you were saying with Age of Empires, where they've abandoned too many storefronts. And to be honest, their Xbox storefront on PC was a mess. And most people I know that purchased games on their Xbox PC environment regretted it. Weird things like locking to an individual hard drive, letting you move. Like when we were playing online games with Game Pass, it worked great that we all owned the game, but there were as many times someone went to boot the game that we were playing, whatever, let's say it was Sea of Thieves, and they're like, it's not working, it won't boot. Everything's telling me I have to delete the entire library and then re-download the game. So it's 105 gigs. I'll see you guys in 45 minutes. I'm going to go get a sandwich. Well, you shouldn't have those kind of situations on your store. And they've abandoned a couple stores at this point in time. And that's not good for mindshare. So what they need is a very strong, persistent store ecosystem that they will back with branding that will stay. It can't be Windows Store, then Xbox Store, then this store, then that. It needs to be married to whatever
Helix
it chooses
Gamer
to.
DNA store or whatever, yeah.
It needs to be married to what they decide it is, and gamers need to build trust in it again. If they can build trust in an ecosystem, if they can sort whether you're moving things to one drive or another and downloading things properly, and they might have to take a cut on their games for a while to incentivize players to come over there. Hey, we're bringing back the $50 game. It's $50, but download our ecosystem, or if it's on an Xbox console, it's just what's installed. But I don't know.
How much do you think that piss off third parties, though, if they did that? They just started selling their games for $50 while they're struggling to sell them for $70.
I don't think Sony wanted to turn into ashes of the benchmark. I think that this is the risk with some of these things, that they need to be strong ecosystems in themselves. You need to be associating. Another thing is you don't connect the properties as much. So if you play whatever, let's say you're playing Risk of Rain 2 on your PC, you play some Repo, then you play Spider-Man. That's different than you played Spider-Man, you played Ghost of Yotai, you played this. You know, how many times when I was growing up was I arguing with PlayStation fanboys that they didn't own Konami and Capcom? I was like, Metal Gear is not a PlayStation franchise. It's Konami or Castlevania or whatever. Like, you would have these arguments with people that wouldn't understand that because it was more or less locked to their ecosystem. But, I was trying to, I guess, educate people at that point in time. But now I'm realizing how strong that is. When you have strong association between specific companies and brands and titles and your property, that's what creates that familiarity.
I mean, Mass Effect was seen as an Xbox game for years.
Well, it was exclusively. They ported it to PS3 eventually.
It was on PC as well, though. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that's a little bit pre-streaming. So PC became a different entity pre and post streaming. Once Twitch grew the way it did, it just completely changed the nature of how PC is, and how people see it. So people were not aware of PC the same way it was before streaming. So it just changed dynamics quite a bit. So Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that they need a strong store, and they need to tell people. I think Microsoft literally needs to say,
Yeah.
we're backing this for 20 years. This is our
Well, that's
20-year
why they're
store
announcing it
plan.
before PS6, because they knew that there were people about to write off next gen before they even announced it. And that's why I think they might even completely unveil Xbox Helix before the end of this year, 6 months before Sony shows the PS6 or something. Like, that wouldn't surprise me, because they know they need to like shake people and say, no, we still exist.
But they're coming in as an incumbent, right? Is it incumbent? Sorry, I'm trying to think.
Opposite of incumbent.
Yeah, the opposite. So they're coming in as like they're restarting kind of gaming at this point. That's the way Microsoft is going to be perceived to be coming in. Like, I apologize if that sounds wrong, because they're a giant. They're one of the biggest game companies on earth. They're amazing in certain ways, and the more you make games, the more you realize that anyone that can just ship things in time, there's something impressive about that as well.
Sure.
But there's a lot of things that are impressive about Microsoft, but they're coming at this. They need to build faith. Like, when they're kind of in the position when AMD was coming back into the CPU space. If AMD didn't say when they started that, hey, this AM4 platform, we're going to back it for 4 generations or 5 generations, whatever they said when they first came out, people would not have been as willing to buy an X370 motherboard. And that's kind of the situation Microsoft's in. No one trusts their store right now. They want to know that they'll own these games, they'll have somewhere. Microsoft needs to come out and say, hey, we're backing this idea for 20 years. This is our plan, our vision, whatever it is. We're backing it in this way. This generation of hardware will have it. The next gen will be able to play it as well. They need to build that faith back in their ecosystem, especially anyone who's lost library starts losing trust. The most adamant fanboys, if they can't go back to stuff, some people underestimate backlog and library, but if you have positive memories and you just want to touch on a game for 5 minutes that really meant something to you, there's something about it being there. So, and for like Microsoft, honestly, like Lost Odyssey is like one of my favorite games they ever shipped. If they made that accessible to me in some way or another, I'd be more interested in the next Xbox platform. But I don't trust the digital space that digital version I own exists in. I know I'm going to hook up my Xbox 360 or whatnot when I'm ready to play that game, because I don't. It's one of these things. You have to build faith, and that's the position they're in. So hopefully they can get back to it. Hopefully they find a really, really great way to operate when they come out strong with their next generation console. I don't think they can put Steam forward. I don't know, like, Steam's a really cool company.
Again, you are also skeptical that it's going to run Steam.
Well, if Steam does it, like, is it possible Steam could come to some kind of like partnership with them that was mutually favorable?
I think they hate each other. I don't know.
I think the interactions between them.
Well, Lucas writes in and says, will Microsoft's push to be relevant in gaming again herald a new era in DirectX development? Most of the key rendering tech advancements of the last 10 to 15 years have come from other people and were then incorporated into DirectX later, like ray tracing, upscaling. Direct storage was a console consideration really first and was then given a PC equivalent because why not? Do you see Microsoft being a driving force there? And if not, is there any chance of Vulkan gaining on DX with Linux growing slowly but steadily? There's an argument to be made for easier porting. And why is DirectX still so relevant despite, frankly, stagnation? Sheer inertia, maybe? What do you think?
Well, backlog is another reason DirectX, especially DirectX 9, 10, and 11 are often more supported than 12. And even now, you have titles shipping in old engines or weird environments where they're running DX11 or whatnot. DX12 was a huge trade-off. You got a lot of graphics features, and if your game was open, your performance would be better right away, but you had worse frame consistency, a lot of issues. DirectX 12 opened the pipeline to the point where you could be your worst enemy, because 11 covered your mistakes, but it didn't have as much potential. 12 let you make mistakes that could ruin your game. And Vulkan, there are DX12 games on Steam Deck that run with less frame hitching on Steam Deck than on Windows, because in the translation layer to Steam Deck, Valve fixed the calls that were being made to improve performance. So despite the fact that it's translating, there was enough of a performance gain from the fixes they did in their API translation that they made up for the translation cost itself. That's kind of crazy. So
it sounds like you don't think so, really. Like DirectX isn't going to be the driving force. It's just probably going to continue the way it is right now.
Well, it depends. Like the way DirectX was the driving force historically is if it was tied to features that didn't exist anywhere else. So if you have, we saw this with GPUs, was the generation of the post PS3 and even with Xbox One and PS4, there were hardware generations where the consoles were worse because they had worse features, and there was advantages that PC had by having hardware features. We haven't really seen a PC do, other than path tracing, let's say, path tracing, we haven't seen a PC do as much in that regard in a while. It's possible we could see lots of new features. There's hardware advantages like Sony engineered things that they're trying to catch up, especially in terms of the way data is transferred and audio is processed. Those are things that PS5 does drastically better than almost any PC, even to this day. It doesn't do graphics better, it doesn't do CPU workloads better, but those two things, your data throughput and your compression, decompression, and audio, it does better. So we start trying to make these things get into PC to make up for that. I hope DX can have a version that's really, really good in the future. I hope that Vulkan catches up. Vulkan has, like, from what I understand, they have more like they have to meet, and there's a Kronos group, right? And then they have to make agreements, and there's multiple vendors. So it's lagged behind on features. Like, it didn't have ray tracing quite as quickly, I think. There's a few other things that it was behind on. There's when it gets to specific platforms, or I think even like AMD didn't have their ray tracing shipped in Linux for as long, and even porting FSR to Vulkan for this. Like, there's points where there's lagging managing multiple APIs, and it's not that the API isn't fully featured. It's, I guess, that because it's so multi-vendor, there's so much communication between it before it kind of gets aggregated. Whereas if Microsoft makes decisions, they can make everyone comply. That used to be the advantage that they had. It was less of conversation. It was a more, here's the standards, get up to snuff. We'll test your hardware to see if it matches. I might be misspeaking. I'm just trying to recall a bunch of stuff from gaming's past. But I'm trying to figure out what DirectX's kind of path, and I'm speaking off the cuff, so I apologize but if I say anything wrong. But I think that, yeah, they do need a healthier DirectX. If they go to do DirectX 13, it needs to be really, really good at translating to consoles. It needs to be as scalable, lightweight as it is with high-end features. That's what's always determined the best APIs and the best graphics engines too. People still love MT Framework because it's scaled down to Resident Evil Revelations and up to Monster Hunter World, and it did tons of games in that generation. You know, Resident Evil RE engine's been a little bit more hit or miss because Monster Hunter Wilds wasn't quite what people were hoping, but then they love Requiem and Pragmata, so it's hard to know where hardware is, where APIs are. And, you know, then with that, we have vendor locking with path tracing in both Pragmata and Resident Evil 9, where it's not, it seems to be that AMD's denoiser is the holdback there, but I don't know. I could be wrong with that as well, but I don't know. Feature parity is a big thing. Standards, the more we get into specified hardware, the more interesting things get, but also the higher risk that it's going to get dropped. Everyone's been married to a piece of hardware that dropped a feature at some point. So these things are what APIs are trying to manage. So that's a hard thing to keep all the, and they're not the biggest player. When DirectX was making the calls and the shots, Nvidia wasn't as big as it was.
This piece of content is brought to you by the fans that support the independent journalism of Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. And it does need supporting, from personal attacks from tech elites that get mad when we tell you that they are lying to gamers and their own shareholders, to legal attacks from mega corporations that cost the team time and money. This is expensive and often very stressful work. And it's work that doesn't depend on access journalism, nor depend on NDAs or agreements that would sanitize our opinions and hold us back. No, nothing holds us back, and we are independently funded, and we use said funding to do things like pay professional renderers to show you products before they come out so that the sources that provided us the original pictures don't get in trouble. Or we also create bonus content like die shrinks, where you have videos and interviews coming out multiple times a month exclusively to reward our patrons with the extra content that we know they would like to see, whether it's inside scoops or more in-depth conversation and stuff that we just know wouldn't profit if we put it out publicly, but it doesn't need to profit for our fans on Patreon because it is self-funded. And so if you want any of that bonus content, or you want to support the independent journalism of Moore's Law is Dead, or honestly, if you just want to support me, Dan, Gerard, Carbon Cry, or Jesse and Maurice so that we have food on the table every day, consider supporting Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. And to those that already support us there, I'll see you on the Discord. Speaking of which, so let me pivot here, because you're starting to touch on a few things linked to the next thing I want to talk about. And it's, I don't know how much I really have to say or expect for us to discuss about it, but the last time you were on, I think I had just put out some big RDNA5 leak where it's like, hey, they're mixing and matching chiplets. There's this giant, like, around 200 CU flagship die that has a display out, but then also there's the mid-range die that goes into Xbox. Now we call it Helix, back then Magnus, but then it attaches to a Magnus CPU SoC, and then also like you can just like mix and match different like Halo point CPU SoCs with different. It's very interesting, AT3, AT4, AT2, AT0, all these different graphics chiplets that'll be mix and match. But
are they 3D stacking? Or are they
no? There's none of that still. It's like literally
fabric.
I believe they're using bridge dies. So there's this thing where there's
dies.
like a little bridge die under the two for low latencies,
Okay.
for low latency. But TechnoLads writes in and says, let me see here. Well, I think he's got some of this stuff wrong. I don't know. Basically, TechnoLads is asking how well you think like a high capacity RAM lineup could do against Nvidia. And I removed some questions as well that kind of were basically
from
asked,
RDNA, like having a higher capacity GPU with like
right,
RAM or something.
And let me fully frame the premise here too, because the last time you were on, we kind of talked about the overall architecture and stuff, and that was one thing. But since then, it's becoming more and more obvious that Nvidia, although maybe it'll backfire on them, is going to push more and more neural rendering stuff. And I personally believe that the reason they would want to do that is because next gen, it's probably like really pushing AI performance with the whatever becomes the RTX 6090, maybe even to the detriment of just raw raster or ray tracing performance. And I'm wondering, and I could be wrong, but I think there's a chance what we might see here, especially with the documents I have on RDNA5, that looks like this thing might be really, really good at ray tracing. Like, what if AMD focuses on just a massive ray tracing uplift, which we're seeing RDNA5 is probably at least double the ray tracing performance of 4, and 4 was double 3. Mm-hmm. You're getting to this point where they might be better than Nvidia at ray tracing per compute unit. And then they also have a lot of raster, a lot of RAM, but Nvidia is over here pushing for like DLSS5 neural rendering, guessing at half of the frame. And maybe they're doing so because they built their graphics card for AI before gaming. And so they kind of have to find a way to make it work for gaming. I think that is why they originally honestly did DLSS as well. So they had to find a way to make tensor cores make sense for gaming. So I wonder what you think about that. And also just in the low end, AMD is going to be using LPDDR5X and 6 for their low end cards, meaning they could go to 128 gigs of RAM with a low end card if they really wanted to, versus Nvidia being stuck at 12.
They can afford the modules.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what that's like in a year. But like, what do you think about this like AI performance versus ray tracing and raster, and like how it could play out?
RAM and all of that. Hey, hardware is super interesting. I think Nvidia has been betting for a while. Like they've loved the mind share they've gained by having locked ecosystems left, right, and center. Their biggest successes, CUDA, DLSS, maybe ray tracing, probably less so. DLSS has probably been a bigger one for them entirely in terms of being a selling feature of their hardware because gamers were improving their frame rate and not noticing the compromise. The other thing that it created is a scenario where you could run at your display resolution that you wanted and run at the frame rate you want and the graphic settings you want. Historically, gamers had to compromise that. So they were like, I like these settings. I don't want to turn them down. Whenever they get the settings the way they want, but then their frame rate just starts dropping, they'd be more willing to run something like DLSS a lot of the time. Not every gamer, but a lot of them. They gained a lot of mind share with that. So they were running, assuming, hey, if this is me, I'm just speculating wildly, but there's a part of me that thinks that Nvidia was looking at this and being like, hey, when we get to neural rendering, and to be fair to them, like I was saying about rasterization, everything's going to be aliased to hell. And then the problem is how do we fix the aliasing? What's the best technique to doing it when we use rasterization, where we sort everything into pixels? Is it the be all and end all in the way that we should approach these things? Probably not. Is there a future paradigm that will make this all look stupid and irrelevant? Yes. But when is it coming? Now, 10 years? Who knows? But with neural rendering, what they trained it on would just genuinely make the game look different than anyone else. And then they suddenly have exclusivity on hardware in a way that they haven't had before, where the game just looks 100% different. It's not reconstructing to be different. It's just a different looking game because their training sets are different. So unless we have an open ecosystem where the training sets and how things are neurally rendered or whatever is aggregated and standardized and open so that we can make games look a certain way, they'd be vendor locked in a way we haven't seen historically. And I think that they were looking at that and being like, this future is the one where Nvidia wins, is CUDA all over again. That's me speculating.
That's what you think they're doing? Know.
That's what that's me speculating when they were looking at the approach to this. The only
DLSS5.
Everyone has to love it is the problem. If they don't love it, then they're banking on it. So die space is die space. You're creating hardware blocks and you're finding places to put them, and some resources will come at the cost of other resources. If you lower the amount of compute unit shader arrays and you increase the amount of RT cores, or if you have a larger MPU or whatnot, this is all die size calculations, and they're making them, and they probably made them for the GeForce 6000 series a year ago. Now, Nvidia, do they have the mind share to skip a gen and make everyone wait for their next gen? Probably. So if they needed to, could they get away with that? Sure. But these companies are all way bigger than when they were playing around. Nvidia is probably more scared of AMD than they ever have historically, because CPUs are suddenly much more important on the AI roadmap. And who makes the best CPUs on Earth right now? I think AMD finally took the server market share from Intel for the first time. I think that
they are in revenue, I believe now. I'm not sure about revenue,
and maybe not percentage sold, but
they're getting there in percentage too.
It's the first time that they're seeing this huge paradigm shift. AMD's made some, like, to give credit to their engineers, they've made ridiculous hardware with the lowest R&D budgets for forever. So they have some really great people that have worked there for sure. That all of these people make really good hardware. I'm not going to, badmouth them on that front. There's interesting things about all of this, but if Nvidia gambled, hey, we're going to do this, and then people don't like it, this is an opportunity for AMD. But it's an opportunity for one gen. They can build some mind share in that gen. If Nvidia just decided, hey, we're not launching the 6000 series that we originally planned, they could afford to do that right now. It's not the end of the world. If their mind share is more important than anything else, they have ways to preserve that. Just say, hey, just wait for next year. We're going to blow your socks off with whatever this is. And they would be able to put
You want to know an interesting theory of mine? This isn't a theory I'm married to. This isn't me like saying, I'm sure NVIDIA's doing this. But I know, what is it? I think it's Hammer Lake is supposed to be the first Intel generation that uses NVIDIA tiles. And that's probably, if I remember correctly, like 2028, late 28 maybe, or like 2029. And then also we know that Nvidia is talking to Intel about making graphic stuff, and we know there's rumors out there about the 6000 series from Nvidia being delayed maybe even to 2028. And I'm like, is there a chance they want all 3 nanometer, 2 nanometer, 14A capacity from TSMC only for AI? And well, the answer is yes, but and is there a chance what they've decided to do? And I also had a leak about 5090 engineering sample, 5090 Ti, that's apparently out there. There's a 5090 Ti engineering sample that uses a ridiculous amount of energy. I think it was like 750 watts or something. And it like tries to push like another 20% out. Like, is there a chance the reason we're seeing these rumors of like the super series coming out crazy late, a 5090 Ti, 6000 series being delayed, is it there? Are they actually still going to do a super refresh, but they're going to do it like 2027? And then that's how long they wait until they actually launch a fully new Genesis 28, 29, because they're waiting to use an Intel node so they don't have to pull from TSMC for AI. I just think that's an out there or
a Samsung node. Like, I think
and did they show off DLSS5? Because they're hoping that with the 5090 Ti is enough to make people not buy RDNA5, even though RDNA5 on paper is wildly faster and uses half the energy. I don't know.
Yeah, but Nvidia has enough of a, like, this whole conversation's been about mindshare in a weird way. But Nvidia has the mind share that even if Radeon was more powerful, people would pretend that it's not at this point in time, like in the PC gamer ecosystem. It's not everyone, but there's a percentage of people who would be like, whatever. I remember.
But DLSS5 is what would have allowed them to do that. Is if everyone liked it, they're like, it is better because just use DLSS5. But everyone hates DLSS5.
Some people will like it, and that's we don't have to agree with them, but.
I don't know if some people will. The polls are like about as much approval as Congress.
I don't like it, so I'm not saying, but I also, anyways, we don't have to get into that. But I think that if we're talking NVIDIA, AMD, they have different strengths. NVIDIA has always been on the forefront of general purpose compute. It's been what's driven them for forever. Whenever there's a new paradigm, they've had the tools in advance so everyone can jump on them. AMD's biggest strength is its partnerships, in that everyone who has worked with them loves working with them and wants to continue working with them. So this is where those two things might come to a head. AMD has never been big enough before to make some of the headway that they can, in theory, make here. But AMD isn't who they used to be. They're a much stronger company than they've ever been. And they're probably putting a bunch of engineering resources on all of these things, and hopefully some marketing resources. They need to fix some of that. Yeah. They make good hardware. NVIDIA makes good hardware. Like, the hardest reason to recommend AMD is any mixed workloads for a long time. If they did any kind of content creation or video editing at the same time as gaming, it was hard to recommend AMD, not because the hardware is incapable of it. It's that the software wasn't going to take advantage of it. And their hardware is great. It could have done it. It just, Adobe, for some reason, wasn't incentivized enough to back that hardware to the same degree. So AMD's got to fix that if it wants to get the PC market share. It's going to, and there's a chance, hey, with the more that they're getting these AI contracts, because they've been getting more and more AI contracts this year, the more software is catered for their ecosystems. In a world where software is catered for their ecosystems, there are so many problems AMD faces when they ship hardware that is not their fault. It's just not their fault. They can't go and drop millions of dollars on Adobe and Autodesk and all of these other people to make sure that their software is perfectly accelerated for the latest Radeon series when it comes out, the way that NVIDIA does. And because of that, it hurts their reputation. Windows, like I was saying earlier, the most stable piece of hardware I play games on is the PS5 back there. In terms of stability, just stability, that's AMD hardware. But if I was using that same hardware Windows, would NVIDIA outperform it in terms of stability? 100%. So hardware is not their problem. Software is their problem. They need to get their software ecosystem into the place where they can win mindshare the way that they can. The 9070 XT is a great piece of hardware. I play around with it.
That one back there. It's incredibly stable, by the way, compared to
it's fun. And you run an RE engine game, like any engine that's pretty neutral. like kills on this. You're like, wow, this is
and see
running
that's the thing.
well.
Like if AMD, and I feel like, you know, this is Groundhog's Day because we were hoping AMD would be more aggressive than they were several times now, but like they're launching a new graphics series next year right next to next gen consoles. In fact, one of them literally shares the same chiplet as their dedicated card. And I forgot what I just put out an Xbox video last week that talked about how there's all this talk going on with AMD and Microsoft together now about like how much RDNA5 is going to be like the baseline for developers to optimize to. So you get that buy-in, you get that optimization. At the same time, you just have like these graphics cards that are wildly mass produced for a console and dedicated graphics. So you get that savings per unit made. For the mid-range and on the high end, you get this thing that might just be a complete beast. Like you got to wonder, like, if there is an opportunity here to just really send a message. And now they have the money too. I mean, their stock price just went to the moon.
Then we go back to APIs. This was the big thing that held them back for forever. Nvidia was taking advantage of an API overhead issue, and that every game was built in DirectX 11 for forever to get more draw calls. So AMD GPUs would stall on draw calls. That was just, you could measure it. It was so measurable. And every open world game would get so hammered on Radeon cards for forever, not because the cards were incapable of it, because there was an API bottleneck. And we have these kind of issues in our ecosystems. Now, when we're talking about a new paradigm, you have new Radeon hardware coming out, you have new Nvidia hardware coming out. It needs to be tailored. The API needs to be tailored to match, to take advantage of. I told you before, I've worked with a developer. I've worked with a developer who had to turn off optimizations that they did for shipping games because the API on PC didn't support it, or the majority was Nvidia. So they literally turned off.
That's not going to happen Radeon. This time though, because they're building for Helix, which is part of the same pipeline.
But is that now if does Helix require this API relationship to not? Now that we're talking Valve versus Microsoft, and who's going to win in that regard? Because
Valve versus Microsoft and PlayStation.
Yeah, so if Valve, then we're talking about API wars again. Just, you know what I mean? Like, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have Valve's going to have its Linux based API conversion layer, or you just port directly to Vulkan and it'll have more sway.
Well, let's see if the Steam machine even launches before we start talking about any leverage it has. Well, no offense to them, but I'm sorry. Like, I want to see them prove they can even launch this device.
In order for Microsoft to push this in a way that lets you move your PC optimizations from your console development environment to PC, it needs to be married at the API level so that they carry over, and that there's no advantage. And it needs to be talked out between the two hardware vendors, because if Nvidia doesn't support it and it's the majority of the market, you just turn off those features. So if it's not hardware optimizations that both Nvidia and AMD
but no, they would have them. It's on Helix. It's on dedicated Radeon. It's on all AMD laptops, which they're taking market share. It's on PlayStation 6. It's on the PlayStation 6 handheld. They will support those features. So. They will.
But does Nvidia support those features?
I don't know, but they're not in any of these consoles.
Well, they're not, but this is... And
they're not shipping any graphics cards. You can't even fucking buy them. So who cares?
The whole point of the beginning of this conversation, though, was... why consoles are losing their relevance to some degree.
Was it? I don't think they are. I think they're very
well, like PlayStation and Xbox, right? Like those set the development ecosystem for forever. And I've seen it shifting in the development space more towards PC first. And that wasn't the case 5 years ago. There was way more people on dev kits for PS4 or PS5 at the time working on dev kits for Xbox. It's much more often now that people are less dev kit first for console hardware doing optimizations, and they're much more PC first and port to the consoles afterwards. That shift has happened in a dramatic way in the last 5 or 6 years.
Well, but I think it's all going to be the same thing, because that's at least Microsoft's goal with Helix. Is it's one thing, it's one package you develop for PC and Helix at the same time, and that will also be shared much with many of the features PS6 has. So I think that that does change next gen, because they're trying to marry them.
I'm hoping so. Like if they come to the situation where like Radeon is like whatever the comparison videos you see on Hardware Unboxed or Gamers Nexus or Linus Tech Tips or wherever, when they compare Radeon, the RDNA5 GPUs, and if it's, up a 100 FPS over a 5090 in like every game, that's undeniable. People will notice improved latency in multiplayer games. or new multiplayer games that are heavier come out and you can play it at 165 FPS or 200 FPS on the Radeon, you're at 100 on Nvidia. That's noticeable. If you can carry these optimizations over, I hope that I see this ecosystem. I've just seen this stuff get turned off too much in the past that it's hard for me to trust it.
You would hope that this big partnership with Microsoft is AMD making sure they can't do this again. Like if AMD's smart, that has to be part of this, and they're not stupid, right?
Well, look at Intel's position. So Intel, for the first time, can't push things the way that they used to. So they came up with features. What was the feature that basically created game profiles, and then game developers would have to buy in to get more performance?
Oh, the APO thing.
Yeah, so they created this, but they created it right when they lost the majority market share, and then they couldn't get any buy-in to take advantage of the feature. And that's the position that Intel was in. And AMD's been in that position for forever. Like you and I talked about in the past when they did whatever, Mantle and True Audio. And,
no, but they're not in that position because Helix is desktop. I keep saying, it is literally the same chiplet. Like, so AMD, I think, avoids this pitfall next gen.
Yeah, there's no other layer. It's just they've broken their...
It's literally the same thing. And I think as much as this is a necessity for Microsoft to stay relevant because they kind of have to share a chiplet because we don't know if Xbox Helix will even sell 20 million consoles. Although there's rumors they're aiming for at least 40 or 50.
Hey, you're right. If it's in laptop, if it's in desktop, if it's you target it the exact same way, if Microsoft releases the API that marries all of this and that and Valve piggybacks off of that so that Vulkan translates and does things the same way, could you get some massive Radeon advantage? Sure. I'd love to see it.
And wouldn't it be just insane if they just didn't learn from their past mistakes? Granted, their marketing department doesn't, but I mean, that's different than their engineering department, you know.
We talking about AMD or Microsoft? Right
AMD. Microsoft, I don't know.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that they realized some shortcomings. They realized that they weren't a player in the market to be able to leave weaknesses in their hardware. I think that you can see that through Radeon's development and going from GCN to GCN 1.2, 3. So, and then RDNA from there is each one was kind of targeting weaknesses in the same way. And then you saw that kind of culminate when, other than ray tracing, you had parity between the 5700 XT and the 2070. And then they, traded blows but then Nvidia had high-end products when AMD didn't. So we're kind of at this place. We need the right amount of mind share. AMD has to release GPUs that take advantage of it. It's really good if they have it as an approach where they have people targeted in desktop and laptop and notebook and handheld and console. And then we can get optimizations that way. Then maybe they have enough market share, especially with their CPU mind share right now. Because AMD is, it's not there on GPU, but it is there on CPU. They have the highest amount of CPU mind share that they've ever had. So people aren't looking with disgust on the brand AMD in their computers the way they did 15 years ago. So maybe more like 10 years ago, the bulldozer era. So yeah, I mean, that would be cool. I want a really strong AMD, and I think that they've done amazing products. I've used products from all these vendors in my life, and I'm always excited by engineering that makes more gaming possible. I don't think it's going to be neural. I hope that there's some new paradigms coming soon. But I mean, maybe it uses the same hardware for a different reason, but I see all of the white papers on all different kind of tech previews and whatnot. Like, people didn't think ray tracing or path tracing would be feasible in hardware for a long time. And I mean, it's still technically not possible. The reason is this: we got better denoising.
All right. So I got to ask you this question point blank, though. So I was just doing a little math on the side. It's very dumb scratch math. I'm just pulling up Tech Power Up, looking at the performance of the 9070 XT relative to the 5090. And hypothetically, I have one dock. It's like over a year old by now, but let's just use that. It's that RDNA5 should have a 154 compute unit model. Okay. Let's do, I just did
5. How many is 9070?
64.
Units? 64.
So it's a lot more. So
Yeah.
Imagine, and I have a doc that says RDNA5 is 10% higher IPC. Let's assume 10% higher clocks. And I'm being a little optimistic, but just to make the point, let's assume they get to something almost 3 times faster than the 9070 XT. And then but the 5090 is starting quite a bit ahead of the 9070 XT. And let's just say
that's at 82%
on tech power.
Yeah. Yeah, tech powered up.
And so let's assume the 5090 Ti is 20% faster, which would be pretty hard to get there. But let's say it did for the 5090 Ti. I have that like
200%. So yeah.
So yeah, you're getting to like 2.9 divided by 2.3, like 25% more performance. I want to know what you think the difference would be. Like, let's say Nvidia launches it because they don't want to launch a 6000 series until they can use Intel. Like, let's say they launch a 5090 Ti. Maybe it's still $2,000. I don't think it would be, but let's say it is. And then AMD launches their thing, and it's like 25% faster than the 5090 Ti. It probably uses half the energy. Do you think DLSS5 would be enough to sway? I'm not saying AMD is going to outsell Nvidia because that would be like a quadrupling in market share. But like for AMD, like they're starting from like 10 to 20% here. I mean, I don't know. It depends on how you do the math. I don't know. Like, when do you think people are won over? Like, AMD has a $1,500 card. It's 25% faster than Nvidia's $2,000 card. Uses half the energy, and it's even better at ray tracing. But Nvidia's has DLSS5. Do you think that really sways people? Because everyone I talked to behind the scenes is that DLSS5 was the way they showed it off was a huge blunder, and it did a lot of damage.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking at the numbers, and I don't want to be married to a snapshot in time of when I say something.
We're into crazy speculation, so no one hold this against us.
Okay. No one holds it against us.
Me either. I don't know if it's gonna be that fast.
Well, look at it. It took AMD. It took AMD basically when did Ryzen 1700 come out? Was it 2016?
2017, I think.
2017. So 9 years. It took 9 years for the market share to start tipping completely in the favor of Radeon. And sorry, not Radeon, of AMD CPUs.
I'm kind of asking could this be Zen 1 really though? Right? Like
that's the thing. So if you're asking me whether it's going to be Zen 5, I'm going to say no. If you can ask me, it could be Zen 1, sure. I wish AMD had done it without murdering their biggest evangelists because the FSR 4 scenario murdered their evangelists.
Yeah.
So you had people, and this is what we were talking about, you need people to have positive experiences with an ecosystem that they're not attributing to another ecosystem, like when Sony gamers are now attributing their ecosystem to Steam rather than Sony. You end up with this weirdness. And AMD had evangelists, NVIDIA has way more, but they have people that are proclaiming the glory of this. Or why did you buy a 5070 Ti when you could have bought a 9070 XT? It's like $600 cheaper and runs the same, or whatever. Like whatever it is that they're saying. You have these kind of arguments, but they really put their biggest fans on the back foot. You got to watch when you hurt your fan base because they're the ones. Like the main reason that Nvidia sells like crazy in the the data centers at first was because those were gamers. The people at these tech companies, these big tech companies, also like playing games, and if they have GeForce in their desktop PC when they're recommending huge server recommendations, who are they going to tell you to go with? So we need to keep these PC gamers, like everyone who works with these people, NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, they need them to be happy, these evangelists for their hardware, because they get jobs at places where they get to make suggestions or advice. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's critical. If AMD hadn't done that, if they hadn't lost, because I feel like a lot of AMD fans and Radeon hardware fans are more reluctant to recommend it after that shift. Because let's say that when you recommend a product to someone, if they don't like it, you feel bad for that recommendation.
Yes.
So if as people, let's say they regard me as in my friend circle as a tech guru or whatnot, like you're the tech guy in it, and then you made them buy a 7900 XTX. And let's say they were running and they're fine, but then they start getting really upset about this FSR situation. Now, I, as a tech enthusiast that recommended this, feel guilty for my recommendation. And this is the problem they have to deal with. You need to keep those people happy because those people get jobs because they're obsessed with tech in an
Yep.
interesting way. And then they move into these places and companies. And when they make recommendations, before they might have been willing to recommend Radeon, but after that, they might not be willing to, because you don't want to feel like you made that person make a mistake. You want them to feel like they made a great purchase and they feel good about that, which is like, that's how Tech Yes City talks all the time. For him, it's all like he just wants people to feel good about the recommendations that he makes. And I felt that way in the past. And I've been a fanboy when I was younger, like 15 years ago. I remember being like a Nintendo fanboy when I was a kid and a PlayStation fanboy. And being this, I'm much more like,
yeah. Well, we all grow up eventually, hopefully.
Days.
Yeah.
Yeah, where I've used everything. Like my first GPU was like an ATI Rage Fury, then it was a TNT2, then it was a GeForce One 256 and a GeForce 3 and an ATI 01 Wonder. Like I've played with these hardware vendors for forever. I had two GeForce 680s when Nvidia had their big driver melting scenario. Like no one is perfect in like the history of GPU production. There's messiness and there's interesting hardware across it. AMD needs to get that mind share back.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they, I think transparency would have done it. Even if they had a deal with Sony,
like just saying why we're not porting it. Yeah, and unfortunately, from what I can tell, I don't think they're going to do official FSR4 and RDNA3 because I'm seeing that they've upgraded, or not have upgraded, I guess, decided on some sort of RDNA4M probably for Medusa Point, and they're pushing that into everything after this year. And I think their way they're looking at it is, well, Sony's happy with their PSSR2 on PS5 Pro, and frankly, everything we're going to produce in a year from now is going to support FSR4 normally anyways. And, we have half of our products already do.
It's a 5-year live down cycle.
I 100% agree with you.
The repercussions of just the time to live this mistake down is 5 years, especially without transparency on it. They can down it to a year and a half with transparency. If they came forward
and just said, we're doing this and this is why, we just don't think we can afford to do it.
Well, even that, or even they said, actually, we had Sony help engineered the solution and they have a partnership agreement on it with us. And here's the contract.
Sony would not like you if you told you. Or Valve. Yeah.
Or Valve did. Like we had a deal with Valve, and Valve created a version of this that we injected into their translation layer to Vulkan that is going to integrate it. And then actually everyone with an old Radeon can install this. I heard the relationship with Microsoft, install SteamOS and get that. If it's one of these reasons, they're perfectly logical reasons. And AMD has had to make a lot of partnerships to survive. It's not stupid decisions, but they
personally, I think there's a good chance that what AMD's seeing is they're like, well, PlayStation 5 Pro is solved. Steam Machine's probably solved by Valve, and Microsoft's piloting this upscaling tech that uses the NPU. So like anything Strix Point and later can just use that for upscaling on Windows. Why are we going to support two branches of this when we already basically have three other branches being handled by vendors on their own? I'm going to begin again. I don't think that's a good argument. I still think they should do it, but I'm not seeing any evidence. They
said it.
I agree. If they would just say it. And they could do a big video. They're like, hey, here it is. Like, look, Microsoft, use your NPU. Like if they could just get out there and say that. Yeah.
And tech evangelists, which is the start of this whole thing, they love explaining stuff about tech to people.
Yes.
So if
Wendell comes in and explains the new neural engine, NPU way of doing it, and he has a video on why it makes sense or not, like that.
Yeah. Or talks about like tech people love explaining stuff they understand to people that don't, like, and they've hurt their evangelists. That's the problem.
Yeah, because I was told they were working on it and then they stopped, and I'm like, and I get 10 comments a day. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. They stopped. I don't know. It sucks.
That was like, as someone who, the 7900 XTX is a beast still, but not having FSR4 hurts that GPU. It really hurts that GPU.
Yeah.
It's a giant GPU. It's so powerful. It's got a ton of RAM. It runs everything pretty well, but you come into cases where you're like, man, if I could just hit balanced FSR4 balanced on this and run it,
Mm-hmm.
or quality, just to get some extra FPS in the edge cases where it doesn't run things well, that would have been a huge game changer for that generation. And anyone who bought that generation, it just makes it harder to recommend. It's like, do I want to push you forward to uh, whatever the next generation Radeon if they're going to do that to you again? We have to be really, like, all of these game developers have to be careful cutting features. Hardware producers have to make sure that they support these things. Like I was saying about Microsoft, if they want to get the mindshare back, they need to proclaim persistency with their storefront. These are things that all impact mindshare, and everything is in this conversation seems to be kind of hinging on that. It'd be really great. I It's gotten to the point I love just talking hardware. Like, I kind of would prefer to just talk about, how many shaders and ROPs and TMUs that we get with RDNA5 and what it's theoretically capable of and this, but I'm so hurt in the conversation about mindshare about this that it's hard for me to even have fun with the hardware.
Yeah.
I just want to get back to the point where we can have fun talking about hardware, where this stuff is leveled out. We're not talking about like exclusivity or battles in this way. It's just like, what's interesting about this? How powerful is it? How many shaders? Oh, cool. It's going to be this much more powerful. Whereas, like, that hurt me too. The FSR4 announcement. It's like the lack of announcement. I want to back these companies, and AMD's been doing really, really great on the CPU side in terms of just developing stuff. And really, like, I think a big part of what saved Zen was the persistency of AM4. Mm-hmm. And then the promise of like 3/4 of that for AM5. They weren't going to go as far as they did with AM4, but they're...
Oh, no, yeah, they are. They're going to support Zen 7.
Well, now they are. Now they are. Because they want to put everything to servers. They're like, if we keep sewing the same socket.
Yeah, well, I also think that there's something where I've noticed in the roadmaps that I've recently leaked where, like, they don't plan to use DDR6 for a very long time. And, like, there's clearly something where they're like, that's just going to be too expensive until 2030. So we might as well just keep using AM5. I think that's...
Well, what they've showed with X3D in general is if you make your cache big enough, then...
That too.
There's very little... you're not going to see it the same way. It's not that there's no difference. There's difference, but it's not as obvious, the difference, once you have enough cache for it to outlast it. And that's why, it's even interesting because even with the 9950X3D2, the full 3D V cache, it turns out that, it might just be as good to have 8 additional cores that deal with everything other than your game than having 3D V cache on the other one. It wasn't even a necessary engineering problem. You learn these kind of fun things when you have fun hardware. Like, I'm not going to buy the 9950. I haven't 9950 X3D. I'm not going to get the 2 because I don't really need it because it proved a point. But they had to fix a problem first. They had to fix their scheduling. Mm-hmm. Once they fixed their hardware scheduling, and we saw that huge difference between the 7950 X3D and the 9950 X3D because they had fixed their hardware scheduling by the time that the 9950 X3D launched, where it was less of an issue just to have, hey, here's 8 cores that are dealing with everything else. So you get a computer that runs basically great all the time. That's a really great piece of kit. I don't know. We learned interesting things about hardware. I want to be a cheerleader for Radeon just from a competition side. I like rooting for competition in these ecosystems because competition always brings better hardware. And then also you get more stability on features because when people are coming up and coming, they can't push hardware features because they won't get software support for it. So I want healthy competition so that both parties can push not vendor locked, but interesting acceleration on hardware features so we can see some real movement in this space and get some paradigms we haven't seen in like 10 years. I think that we can get some really, really cool forward moving paradigms in hardware.
Yeah. I mean, people can, and I'm sure will clip this if I'm wrong, but I think I think things are going to get pretty interesting late next year. I have this feeling. I really do. And I don't think the RAM shortage is going to last till 2030. I mean, who remembers the Jay's 2 cents video where they're like, Lovelace isn't even launching in 2022. Y'all got to buy 3090s now. And it's like, yeah, well, that's what they always say. They always say nothing's going to come out. So just shut up and buy our stuff now that's overpriced. I don't think so. I think we're going to see some pretty crazy competition late next year. I really do. It just sucks for this year, you know?
Hey, and if RDNA5 is as modular as they say, like that's always been AMD's strength, is getting AMD's strength is its partnerships, because everyone who works with them loves working with them. That's a good sign that, you know, people that work with you like working with you. And if they have a really flexible modular ecosystem, in theory, they can work with more people and they can get more design wins. The big risk, like seeing the sentiment change with Intel's latest Panther Lake with the integrated GPUs, where suddenly people were very, very positive on Intel when they hadn't been positive for a while for just having as much GPU grunt as they did in a laptop form factor. Then all of a sudden it's feasible for handhelds and all of these other things. And AMD, by tying their GPUs in all of these lightweight devices to RDNA 3, not even RDNA 4, and then that's locking FSR 4 out as a feature where it's most critical for these devices.
Yeah, and
that was
all these Intel products can use a lot of the latest XC features, even though they're like not even going to probably make that in a few years. It is indefendable. AMD not doing this. I'm like, how many times can I say the same thing? It is bad. It's stupid.
And this is what I was saying about the evangelists, is that, like, me personally, I just want to talk about the hardware with you, but I can't. Like, I find myself, we start talking about it, I'm talking about the modularity of it, and then I loop to this FSR4 problem in the modularity argument, because they need a competitive generation. They let their laurels on their GPU front. They bought ATI, they developed Radeon through that. They had a better GPU portion than Intel for a very, very long time. And even when their CPUs weren't even worth buying, the GPU portion
saved them.
You go all the way back to AMD A10, A8, A6, all of that kind of stuff. They had a better GPU, but their CPU wasn't enough to actually do anything with it, and the memory bandwidth was another problem entirely. But with this, now Intel they caught up. They threw something up pretty cool out there suddenly out of nowhere with one of the biggest GPU jumps they've had in a long time. And AMD doesn't really have an answer to that at this point. Like, their best chip is Strix Halo, right? Which is just, it's larger, but then the FSR4 argument comes in again. And you're like,
and they're about to launch Gorgon Halo, which presumably won't have FSR4 support. It's just silly. I mean, again, I don't know how many times we can say the same thing. It's
they do. I don't want to say it again.
That'd be the number one.
The hardware.
That'd be the number one indicator to me that we should really get hyped for RDNA5 is if they finally announce FSR4 support to their prior gen, because it just tells you the mentality has shifted in a smart direction.
Yeah, I want to be hopeful. I just like, all of their attention is off this ball. Like, this is the ball we care about.
Well, here's a point I think I can make that might wrap all of what we're saying together is that, look, it's hard to argue with the results that AMD has gotten recently. I mean, I just checked their stock price. I've heard people talking about it in the Discord and blah, 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 blah. Okay, I didn't realize it just went like line, go straight, go up like over the past week. And you know, that's because of their CPUs. They have ignored their GPUs, not as much. You know, they've made some good plays. You can still buy a 9070 XT for a far more reasonable price, closer to MSRP than Nvidia can right now. So they're still supplying it to do it yourself. But all of this at the expense of GPU stuff only works. Well, I shouldn't say only works, but like, I can only make the argument that this was smart for them to focus on CPU in the short term. If in the long term, they're going to use that money and clout to make the rest of their company do well again too. And so if they don't, then that argument doesn't hold.
Well, like I said, this mindshare thing, it's not infinite, but they've hurt themselves for 5 years if they don't talk about this. And specifically on this demographic, we're talking about gaming hardware for computers. if we're talking about that, they've hurt their mind share on that by not being transparent about this particular issue. They haven't been ignoring their engineering side for sure. They're developing RDNA. They work with RDNA5. They work with obviously Microsoft and Sony. And they haven't been they've caught up on most AI workloads comparatively. If you look at 5 years ago, whatever training workloads, they were so far off of Nvidia by without they were competing without having matrix multiplication when Nvidia had it, like these kind of things. And now they're more feature pair. There's more feature parity between Nvidia and AMD, so they've put probably almost all of their engineering resources into being fully featured on the data center side, and they've won contracts to it. To be perfectly honest, one of the reasons it's not just CPUs, it did switch more to inferencing, so CPUs are more required, but also companies can make really big deals on huge servers with one company, and they just have to tailor their software a little bit to it. So there's opportunities for wins here for AMD, and countries like I think France announced a data center that was using all AMD CPUs and GPUs. Other countries have done the same thing. They're putting a huge amount of money and resources into building these giant data centers. And if they can do it in a partnership with one company that's going to be favorable and give them, especially if they want more flexibility in what they're building, then AMD is a really, really good partner for that. It's just, I wish they did all of that without without risking the mind share in another part of their ecosystem where they've never gained the mind share that maybe they've deserved from at least an engineering standpoint. If you look what went into Radeon GPUs, it's there's a reason there's only two big GPU players in the entire market right now.
It's very hard to make a graphics card.
It's not terrible engineering. It's lots of other things that these companies do well or not so well, but they have some really, really great hardware engineers on these teams. And yeah, Intel showed how hard it was to come into this space. And they had a lot of money and resources, and they burned a lot of money even trying to.
They got farther than Qualcomm, maybe. Look at Qualcomm's graphics.
Qualcomm bought half of Radeon basically when they started their graphics. They bought Adreno, which was Radeon's mobile spinoff. So they had access to the original building blocks to all of this. It's messy, man. Like, I just want good hardware. I'm excited for RDNA5 when I see a product that's in it. If I think we're almost at the point though where we have to start solving these key paradigms like aliasing and how we render visuals and build it into our ecosystems, and then we can see some movement that we haven't seen because we're kind of at the great plateau in terms of diminishing returns. It's harder to notice visual differences. There's more and more videos that are comparing games from like 10 years ago and being like, was this peak? Because it doesn't feel that different now. And I can tell you why, for the most part, it's like that. It's because we faked all of these things before, and the more we made them real, it kept the graphic standard at the same point, but we used the processing to make it real time. Like that game they're showing from 10 years ago doesn't have fully dynamic skyboxes with time of day, right? It just didn't have that kind of stuff where the shadows move.
Well, ultimately, that's unsustainable. You can't have a bunch of $1 billion studios that have to pre-bake every single little thing and put all of this into diminishing returns. And again, I think next generation is going to be a big reset. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I hope so too. I really hope that.
Well, it has to be, or this is going to become an unsustainable business model. Like, let's be honest. It has to. It has to be a big reset. So.
Yeah. Well, I think what the gamers are getting frustrated with is they're seeing games that look worse than games that they played that are running really poorly. And, you could explain engines to them. You can explain, doing more real-time stuff versus fake stuff, but it's harder to sell that kind of stuff. So I don't know. We need to see some movement in some of these regards. And, people aren't as impressed by a table with 50 billion things on it versus 1,000 things on it. So, that law of diminishing returns is always going to kind of be something that we have to work through.
All right. On that note, I think we should close this one out before we hit the 3-hour mark. But once again, my friend, I want to thank you for coming on. You say you like talking about the hardware. I'm sure you'll be on again sometime soon, and we can try to talk about the hardware. But I mean, in the past couple months, it's all been business, macro level stuff, and software. And that's really what I wanted to bring you on, and I really enjoyed it. But please plug anything you want to plug.
Okay. Well, I don't really have anything particular to plug right now. I'm Bryan. I make art for games. I make games. Follow me if you want. You can always follow me on Twitter or Instagram or whatever. Just search my name. You'll find me. Yeah, once again, I didn't mean to say anything that offended any of these. My opinions are my own. These are any of these companies or whatnot. All my thoughts and opinions are my own. And if I said anything wrong, I'm reacting to these things off the cuff. This is the first time I've heard any of these questions, really. So hopefully it was entertaining. Feel free to reach out if you found anything interesting. Valve, if you want to send some Steam machines my way or any hardware vendors, feel free. I'm super interested in tech always, and I hope you have, feel free to reach out, and hopefully I can create some stuff that you guys really like.
And there will be a link, of course, to your Twitter below, which can link to Massive Damage and all of that. So you can find Bryan and all the stuff he's working on there. For everybody else, as always, thanks for watching, listening, like, share, subscribe, hype the video, ring the bell button, subscribe to the podcast on your podcast app of choice, and give us a review. And then, of course, support us on Patreon to ask guests like Bryan questions, get access to exclusive content like Die Shrink and a bunch of other stuff that I'm too tired to try to remember all of it. But yep, again, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarked by me, the creator, Tom. However, Moore's Law is Dead is much more than just one man. It is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance also provided by Carbon Cry and Kerry No Sugata. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com. On the About Support page, in the event you want to hire me for consulting work, or hire Gerard for audio work, Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or interested in working with Carbon Cry or Kerry No Sugata as well, you can find all of our information there. You can also find our long-term sponsors there and show them some love for helping make this work possible. Additionally, if you are a fan and would like to mail Moore's Law is Dead some love in a letter or with hardware donations, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. Every month, and every day actually, depending on the person, me, Gerard, Dan, Jean-Philippe, and more are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of entertaining content and investigative journalism that aims to be as independent as possible from outside influence. Only direct funding from fans can make this possible in the modern era. And so if you have any extra money every month, even just $1 or $2, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. All members of the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon, even down to the $1.28 128-bit tier, get access to a catalog of dozens of essential Die Shrink episodes and the ability to ask guest questions ahead of Broken Silicon recordings. Additionally, higher tiers get access to the entire catalog of hundreds of episodes of Die Shrinks, and these include exclusive interviews with game devs and other guests, behind the scenes looks at Moore's Law is Dead leaks, and more niche coverage of subjects that really only the biggest gaming dorks like me and you would care about. They would not profit on YouTube, but they don't have to profit on Patreon. And so if you're interested in that, you can get access to all of that stuff and even more at higher tiers, like ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask free questions in Loose Ends live streams ahead of recordings, thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts, and access to the Discord with thousands of fans there who would love to discuss gaming hardware with you. I am one of them. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us, please just share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family and on social media and Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app. All of that stuff does help a ton as well. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now is the time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 1024-bit HBM3 or higher supporter levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Full, Z Jits, Daniel D, Nicholas Buckner, Deke, Darren Close, Jen Rauner, MJB1, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, SNES Chalmers, Jem Ferrier, Valko Malev, Jensen Wang, Sarcastro, Chris Rich, Halbuma, Evan Dingle, Compressed AI Blocks, Shredbird, Sammy Malas, Chris Anthinos, Jonathan, Tommy, Jake223, Jake Martin, Zlicky, Winwing, Gamers Unite, Ian Clifford, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Travis Gooding, Matthew Cassell, Zootsuit Taylor, Mads, Greg, Michael McGee, Stephen Coates, Mark Mitchell, Amiable Chief, James Anderson, Mark Raidmaker, I Should, Salty Internet, Internet Pirate, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Cameron, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Dan M, 1988, Teak Autumn, Reginald Ari, Little Germany, Windstar, James I. Raider, Shay, Milton, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Steven Dick, Mac Daffy, Justin Bussell, Austin Haggerty, Joe Foot, Brian Wright, Brian Scanlon, Hardland, Slushbot, Jansen, Angima, The Forbidden Juice, Bing Bong 3, John Swin, Solarized 80, K-Cum, Sprutnik, Brian P, Coinster 671, Pento, Winto, Omega Doge, Hooger, Andrew Kiwi, Special Axley, Mr. Tiger, John Wick, Boomstick, Porcelain Oats, Kareem, Al Masri, Rye Hill, Cheap Bulls, Dominic Passeri, Menos, Ragkusis, AI Soldier 789, Kevin Coots, Jonathan Harris, Bespoke EP, Fred Berger, Kainush Kagani, Johnny Tran, Sabir Ahmed, Arkeo, RK0, Dudester, John Tiberius, Marika, OMG Clover, Roadkill Dog, Michael Garner, Andreessen, Henry Day, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.